right. Basically, well, let me just introduce myself, because there's some of you that have never been to the Bread Beckers before. How many of you have never been to the Bread Beckers? I see a lot of new faces. We want... Never been to a class, but you have been to the Bread Beckers. Well, we have this group of ladies here to thank for this class today. They are from the University of Georgia Extension Service, and they kind of contacted me and asked me would I please put together a class for them. So I did. Was going to just do it for them, and then I thought, well, I might as well open it up to anybody else that wants to come. And look, you all came. So I'm very, very excited. It's a little bit different format than I usually do. Most of my classes are cooking. We get right into cooking. But today, I'm going to do a little bit of a nutrition presentation, a basic general overview of my philosophies in life of eating healthy. And then we are going to do a little cooking. I'll mill some grain and show you how easy it is. We're going to whip up a batch of muffins. We're going to make some black-eyed peas and rice, all in the last hour, and you're going to eat that before you leave. So I'm real excited. So we got a lot to get done. But here is, all of you should have gotten a handout. And in that handout, you have an article called Healthy Eating Simplified. I really want you to understand that eating healthy is very, very easy. Basically, what I see happening in America today is we have two extremes. On the one hand, mealtime has been reduced to a drive-through window, a box, frozen something, or something for the kids like chicken nuggets, macaroni and cheese, French fries. That's basically what children these days are living on. Frozen, eating out, canned, ready-made, all this stuff. Or the other extreme, someone thinks that they want to eat healthy and they think they have to do this bizarre, tedious, gourmet-ish cooking, and no one but themselves is going to eat it. Their kids won't like it, and it's just too difficult. Those are the two extremes I'm seeing in our country today. And then, so you decide you want to eat healthy. You go try to buy a book, and you read that book, and you're like, oh, my family's not going for this one. So then you go and you could buy another book, and you could really, and it's totally opposite of what you just read. You got your high protein, low carb, you got your high carb, low protein, you got your all raw, you got your cooked, you got your vegan, you got your meat eaters. I mean, it's just, I find it to be more confusing than enlightening. In fact, I read a statistic that 25% of Americans don't know, are confused about what's healthy and what's not. So I'm here today to hopefully bring some simplicity back to it and enlighten you a little bit. And I think I hear this question, and I kind of even asked this question myself, is there anything wrong with good old meatloaf and mashed potatoes? And I say, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Our ancestors of 100 years ago ate real food. Whole grains was the base of their diet. And that's what we need to come back to. The basic premise that needs to prevail over everything I teach is this one premise. I'm going to have to move this out so y'all can see over there. Here's my basic philosophy of life as far as eating. Eat real food. What do I mean by real? Eat an apple instead of an apple-flavored fruit bar. Eat a real piece of broccoli and eat a real piece of chicken instead of the thing that you pull out of the box and has some kind of mystery meat, in there and that you pop in the microwave. At least, for the most part, let that be the norm. One of the best books I've ever read on healthy eating is What the Bible Says About Healthy Living. Dr. Rex Russell, the late Dr. Rex Russell, fabulous, ingenious man, just really, really questioned God about what was healthy and what was not. And he came up with 3 basic principles. Eat only what God created for food. Don't alter God's design. And I kind of reword that into eat it as close to the way as God created as possible. In other words, eat the apple, eat the broccoli, eat the chicken, eat the eggs, eat the real butter instead of the chemical-laden stuff that we're being presented with. And then his 3rd principle is avoid food addictions. When I read this book, I went, this makes sense. I can do this. I can eat real food. And that's basically it. That's why I really don't carry a lot of other books on healthy eating, because I don't think you need any more. What more do we need? It's so funny to me when I speak and teach, I'll have people come up and say, can you just give me a step-by-step plan of how to eat healthy? And I'm like, Just eat real food. And what is so freeing about this is you might want to be a vegetarian. Go for it. Just eat real vegetables. It grieves me to see people that say, I want to be a vegetarian, and they eat this processed stuff, you know, these meat substitutes that are full of chemicals and all these fake things. Eat real vegetables. If you want to be a meat eater, be a meat eater. Just eat the real thing. If you want to do a raw food diet, do a raw, whatever. So you see, you don't have to change what's right for you, just eat it real. And you can start today and do this. And you can shop in the regular grocery store to do this. That's what's exciting to me. Shop the perimeter. You've probably all heard that. Shop the perimeter. That's where the real food is. Once you leave the perimeter and you start going up and down the aisles, that's what gets you in trouble. Every now and then you got to go for some mayonnaise, and you start eating the bread, you're going to have to go for some more toilet paper because you're going to be so regular. And you're like, whoa, okay. Listen to the CD. It gets really worse than that. But anyway, so, you know, those are the things. In fact, have you ever thought about this? Once you leave the perimeter, just about every other food aisle in the grocery store, the up and down aisles, outside of the canned fruits and vegetables and the fruit juice, is an altered grain product. Did you ever think about that? So that whole low carb thing that kind of came on the scene there for the last 20 years, how in the world did anyone ever think that we could live that way? Because most of the food in the grocery store comes from a grain. You've got your baking aisle, all your white flour, your white cake mixes, you know, all your denatured things, your altered grain products there. You got your chips, your crackers, your snacks, you got your pasta, your white rice, all those things, the bread aisle, and then the toxic, I call it the toxic waste dump aisle. That's the thing that's called cereal aisle that has more sugar and coloring than grain. How it's called the cereal aisle, I'm not real sure. But that's, you know, that's what's out in the grocery store. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. I have 7 steps to healthy eating. And there's one food that I'm finding that you really can't find very easily in the regular grocery store. I get real excited because I can encourage you. And now a lot of grocery stores are going organic. You can find so many really, really good things in the regular grocery stores. There's one exception, and that is my first step to healthy eating. And this is one that a lot of diets will tell you to stop eating bread. I think that's the biggest mistake ever because, like I said, what's the biggest food group we have just about is those whole grains. And I know of no other food that is so nourishing. In fact, of the 44 nutrients needed to sustain life and promote good health in your body, there's only 4 missing in wheat. Only 4. That is vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, and some books that I've read have a fatty acid is missing. Some say, I believe it's iodine or something like that is missing. And it's actually not. There is some there. But that's why the grains are so nutritious and were intended to be the staff of life. So my first step, I have 7 steps to healthy eating. My first step is going to be real bread. This is a significant change that you need to make in your diet, and it consumes a lot of areas that we fall in. And the reason I start here is because, like I said, the bread and the whole grains are so nutrient dense. Also, it fills you up and it satisfies. A lot of people say, okay, I'm going to eat healthy. I want to cut out sugar, you know, and I'm going to cut out bread. And the next thing you know, all you're thinking about is a candy bar and a cookie and a piece of cake. And one of the first things that I noticed when I began to mill my wheat and make my own bread was that my sugar cravings went away. So outside of milling your own grains, it is really impossible to find real whole grain bread in the grocery store. And we're going to go over the history of white flour in just a minute. In fact, let's go over it right now. What makes grains so nutritious? First of all, we have to understand that God created the grain. It's a seed. Grains and I kind of lump grains and beans. When I say bread, I don't necessarily mean a loaf of bread or even a muffin. It can be a pot of oatmeal. It can be a pot of grits. It can be brown rice and black-eyed peas, which we're going to have. That is bread to me. Anything that's a grain or a bean, it's a seed is what you're eating. The seed of this plant God created with an outer surface called the bran. It's several layers thick. And this bran is where your insoluble fiber is for the most part. And the function of the bran is to perfectly protect this seed, keeping it whole and intact. All the nutrients are protected by the bran and the structure of this seed. The internal part of this seed is known as the germ. This is where the little sprout comes from, the little plant comes from. Everything the plant is ever going to be or do is contained in the germ. This is where your oils are. This is where your vitamin E is. This is where your fatty acids are. You hear a lot about fatty acids, and you have to eat fish, and you have to eat all these things. Grains and beans have those fatty acids. And not only do they have the fatty acids, they have every nutrient to break down those fatty acids and make them usable to your body. Now, the bran is loaded with your B vitamins and minerals and your fiber, but its function is to protect the nutrients within. Everything else in here, this part of the seed, is known as the endosperm, better known to you and I as white flour. You didn't think I was going to tell you white flour was actually healthy. White flour is basically little packets of protein and starch. That's basically what the white flour is, protein and starch. Very little minerals, very little vitamins. Protein and starch is there. It's actually the food for the germinating seed. When this seed is planted and gets wet, and then the bran breaks down, and then this gets exposed to moisture, the sprout forms, and then the food is this protein and starch for this sprout until that sprout gets big enough that it grows roots and leaves, so it can start getting its nourishment and its nutrients from the soil and from the rain and the sun. Okay, so does that make sense? That's kind of what the endosperm is. Now, prior to the 1900s, our ancestors lived off of real food and whole grains. Whole grains was their mainstay, and they did not see the sickness and disease like we see today in our country. In fact, I want to give you some statistics. In the 1900s, there was a survey done, and it was found that America was the healthiest of 93 nations looked at. In 1920, there's our little chirping waffle maker. Isn't that just the cutest sound? In 1920, we had dropped to second out of 93. So we were first here. And in 1978, I want you to look at this, we had dropped to 79th. What happened here that made this start declining and then such a rapid decline? And in 1980, just 2 years later, we were 95th out of 100. And in the year 2000, the U.S. Surgeon General declared obesity a national epidemic. We now have the highest incidences of cancer, heart disease, diabetes. We're the most constipated nation in the world. I guess they find that out by the sale of laxatives. I'm not really sure. No one's ever called me on the phone and asked me these questions, but I'm just assuming that's how they figure it out. But in 1977, there was actually a government study done, and they determined that 6 out of 10 illnesses, actually causes of death, were related to diet. And so I want you to look with me for just a minute, and I'm going to show you what happened here. What happened to cause this decline in health and then rapidly declining from there? Now, we've looked at the kernel of grain, and we know what's nutritious about it. Left whole and intact, these nutrients, this bran, protects the life and the nutritional value of that seed. If God did not make seeds that way, we wouldn't have next year's crop. Seeds are made to be stored, and they are just as nutritious if you leave them whole and intact this week as they will be next week, next month, next year, 10 years from now, 4,000 years from now. In fact, there's been tombs in Egypt discovered in archaeological digs where they found grain, and those grains, when they planted them, they grew. What does that tell you? They were still alive. They still had the life in there. I've read other articles, scientific journals and stuff, where they found other types of seeds, date seeds in Israel, and they were believed to be 2,000 and 3,000 years old, and they grew. This is the function of the bran, to protect that seed. Left whole and intact, the life is still there. What happens, though, when you break that kernel of grain open, when you mill it into flour? Once that flour, the internal part and the oil and the life and all these nutrients now are exposed to the air, a process known as oxidation begins to take place immediately. You know, you've seen oxidation. Cut an apple. What happens? It starts turning dark. When? Immediately. That is an oxidation process. You've all had nuts and oils. You smell, they go rancid. That's an oxidation process. So the oxidation process begins immediately. And from everything I have read, in the first day of just exposing this internal parts of this kernel of grain, the flour, to air, you lose as much as 45% in the first day of the nutrients that were there. Vitamin E being one of the first nutrients that's going to go. Your grains and your beans, your seeds are one of the richest food sources of vitamin E that we have, and vitamin E is a very, very, very important antioxidant that protects every cell in your body. I personally believe that it's possibly this one critical nutrient next to the fiber and keeping your colon cleansed, but the vitamin E affects every cell in your body, and without it, we literally fall apart at the cellular level. And I have never seen one food bring so many diverse health benefits. I mean, we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of testimonies, from warts going away, to eczema going away, to eyesight getting better, to no longer sick, to heart, functions, cholesterol dropping 85 to 100 points in a month is the average testimony we hear. No longer getting sick anymore, or not very often. And that's our family of 9. My children have only had to go to the doctor 3 times in the last 20 years. One of them was an ingrown toenail, so that wasn't even, an illness. And this, I believe, is because of how healthy and strong our immune system is. Twofold functioning here: keeping that gut cleaned out and empty of toxins, taking the trash out every day. And by that, I mean 1 good bowel movement a day is minimum. And when I say good, it means you need to know that it's happened, not because it's painful, but you just need to know. And you can figure that out for yourself. But eat the bread and you'll see the difference. Y'all make sure you get plenty of oats and bread and stuff today, and tomorrow morning, you'll know what I'm talking about. You'll go, wow, you'll have one of those aha moments. Anyway, and so that's in the first day. By the 3rd day, you've lost 90% of the nutrients that were there. Now, your protein, your starch, and your fiber aren't going to go anywhere. We're talking about those phytonutrients, those oils, those vitamins, the minerals, things like that oxidize very quickly when exposed to the air. So this is what happens. Now, prior to the 1900s, most of the bread baked in this country was baked at home. People either had the capacity to mill their own grain, or they went to the local miller and had him mill their flour for them on a regular basis. Towns and communities were built around the miller. That's where that name comes from. I'm going to the millers today. And think about all the streets, even just in Atlanta. You got Howell Mill, Pools Mill, all these mill roads, and that's because they used to have mills there, and those communities were built around that mill because people went to the miller and they had their flour milled on a regular basis. Maybe not daily, but on a regular basis. I'm sure they were clueless that they were losing nutrients, but here's what they did know: the flour would spoil. They could smell it and they could taste it, because you know what rancid oils smell and taste like. So they knew that flour would spoil, and so they had to get it milled and use it up, and they were using it up. When you're making all the bread for your family, you're going to want to get grain in buckets like this, 50-pound bags, because you're going to be using it up fairly quickly. So that's what happened. Well, in the late 1800s, it was discovered that if they sifted the bran and germ away from the endosperm, the white flour. So they got rid of that oil, got rid of all those vitamins and nutrients. They sifted the bran and germ away, that white flour wouldn't spoil. It would last forever. Wow, what a wonderful discovery. This led to the invention of these huge steel rolling mills that would crush the grain, sift the bran and germ away, and the white flour would go over here. Eventually, these steel rolling mills displaced the local millers. So that's why you don't see the mills everywhere. The grain mills, the rolling mills went out to the grain fields because the white flour can now be shipped all over the country. Didn't care if it took months. How many of you have ever read the Long Winter, the Little House on the Prairie books, where the train got held up and they couldn't get the grain into the town? Well, the grain wasn't going to spoil because it was whole and intact. But if they had been shipping whole grain flour, it would have. But see, now the white flour, it didn't matter either, so that they could ship it for long distances. So the steel rolling mills came on the scene, and white flour and white bread became food for the masses, food for the common people. And guess when this happened? About 1910. And by about 1920, it was pretty much the norm. See something significant about these dates? This is a significant turning point in the health history of our nation, one you're not going to read about in history books. Because here's the deal. White flour and white bread has always been around. But in the day, it was reserved for the wealthy and for royalty because they had servants, they had slaves, they had people, workers, cooks that could sift the bran and germ away manually and produce white flour bread. And in the days of the Romans, the days of the Egyptians, your wealth and your status in the area was determined by how white your bread was. That meant you had somebody, you were rich enough to have somebody making that for you. The poor people ate the whole grains. And have you noticed in history, the wealthy were usually the sickly? Now, we got some inbreeding going on there too, and intermarriages, I'm sure. But do you understand? I'll never forget one time Brad and I, when in our travels, we loved to stay over a day and go to some of the old homes. And I'll never forget, I believe it was Andrew Jackson's home in Nashville, Tennessee, and they had the out back behind the house, the mansion, they had the little slave shacks out there. And I will never forget, in one, they actually had a picture of one of the men. He was like the head, the foreman, and he was 90-something years old. And hanging right there in that little shed was a sifter. And they said he sifted the corn and made the cornbread for the master in the house, and they ate the siftings. He lived to be 90-something, master lived to be 60. I went, pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. So, you know, there's a scripture that says, be careful when you sit down to the king's table. It's Proverbs 23, I believe 3. Be careful when you sit down to the king's table. Do not crave his dainties and his delicacies. They are deceitful food. Interesting verse. Takes on a little bit a different light here. What are his dainties and his delicacies? I say it's white flour fluffy things. What about you? I mean, that's what I'm thinking. And if you think I'm passionate about eating whole grain, listen to that verse. It says, put a knife to your throat, lest you be given to gluttony. Proverbs 23:3. I was right. Put a knife to your throat, lest you be given to gluttony. Year 2000? What? Obesity declared a national epidemic. We are a gluttonous nation. We can eat and eat and eat and eat. Why? Because those white flour fluffy things do not fill us up. Bran fiber, the germ fiber, they fill you up and they satisfy you. Also, the food we're eating is so nutritionally deficient, we're constantly craving. You've all been to the all-you-can-eat buffet, and you circle and you circle and you're full as can be, almost miserable, and you're like, I just want something, you know, and you get home and you're like, I just want something, but you're as full as can be. Jesus compared himself to bread, and he said, I am the real bread of life. He who comes to me, what? Shall be satisfied. Number one thing that I've heard over and over is, I can't eat as much. This bread fills me up. Yet the world will tell you bread will make you fat. I am telling you, we are fat because we're eating white flour, white bread, processed foods, not real fruits and vegetables. You know, when I do my whole class on this, I bring out some visual aids, and I show you things like, you know, a bag of Cheetos has like 1,200 calories. It says it has a little bag like this. Kid you not, I should have brought it out. It says it has 4 servings. Yeah, right. You're going to share that. So you read, oh, this only has 150 calories. No. Oh, actually, the one I have says 8 servings. 150 calories per serving. Promise. You might let somebody have 2 or 3 in that 8-serving bag. So you've got 1,600 calories of Cheetos that you can consume in one sitting and still eat dinner. It's not going to spoil your appetite. You know, for example, too, did you know it takes 16 apples to make 1 cup of apple juice? You can drink that whole cup of apple juice, nothing flat. All the sugar is there, but no fiber. You could not sit down and eat 16 apples. And people tell me, oh, eating healthy is expensive. Not really. I promise you the apple is going to fill that child up more than the Cheetos. Right? And an apple a day keeps the doctor away. You know, remember that old saying. So anyway, so what happened here, 1910 to 1920, white bread, white flour became food for the masses. Guess what happened? 3 diseases became epidemic at the time. Beriberi, which is a vitamin B1 deficiency resulting in nervous disorders, and became epidemic. Pellagra is a vitamin B3 deficiency. It says GI disturbances, skin eruptions, and mental insanity. Pellagra. The third one is anemia, iron deficiency. These diseases began to plague our country. Epidemic proportions. You know, it's funny, when we read the word epidemic, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm like, well, I'm not. I don't have this. I don't know anybody, you know. But I spoke at a conference, one of our seminars, and I'll never forget, this was years ago when I first started speaking, and there was a doctor in the crowd, and I used to get really nervous when doctors were there. I don't know why. They, you know, now I don't care, but you know, it was just kind of like, I was like, who am I? I'm not a doctor. I mean, I have a degree in food science, but I guess I thought I was just not educated enough. But anyway, this doctor was so taken by these diseases, he thought, I'm going to do some research. Well, he sent me a packet of information on pellagra and beriberi and the scourge of these diseases in our country. And what caught my eye, it said the southeastern United States was particularly plagued by pellagra. So much so, the mental institutions in this part of the United States were literally overflowing. They did not have enough beds to house the patients. This was huge. Pellagra. GI disturbances, and look at all the connection. GI disturbances, skin eruptions, mental insanity. Interesting. So I lost my train of thought there. So they did not have enough beds to house the patients. That's what a huge epidemic this was. Health officials all over the country were looking for the answer. They were going, what in the world is going on? They eventually traced the problem to the new white flour on the market. They went to the millers and urged them to put the bran and germ back in the flour. The millers said, no way, not happening, because they had found a very lucrative market for these, I love this, byproducts of the milling process. The bran and germ were being sold to the cattle feed industry. They were making cattle feed out of the bran and germ. So they had a very lucrative market going over here. They were not willing to give that up and put the flour back together. So they chose to do what you and I have just come to accept. And I don't know about you, but when I used to read this terminology on that bag of flour, I thought somebody was doing me a favor. And the word is enrich. When I read that word, I think making it better. Well, let me show you. 35 to 40 nutrients are removed, lost when they remove the bran and the germ. The vitamins, the minerals, the vitamin E, and now being discovered all these phytonutrients that, you know, are just coming up every day. For the 35 to 40 that are lost, when they take the bran and germ out, they put 4 back in. 3 B vitamins and iron. Wow. Does that look like a great trade-off to you? And the thing about these B vitamins is that B vitamins work in a complex. They need each other to do their job. So they lose all these others, but they thought, well, we'll put the B1, the B3, and I think B2 back in there to prevent beriberi and pellagra. Supposedly it did. But let me throw this question out to you. How many nervous disorders do we have in our country today? How many GI disturbances do we have in our country today? How many skin eruptions do we have in our country today? And how much mental insanity do we have in our country today? There's a lot of other factors going on, but I don't believe for a minute that we've gotten rid of beriberi and pellagra. We may not have the clinical symptoms to be clinically diagnosed, but I believe we're still struggling with these issues. And this did not correct the problem. And they put synthetically produced vitamins that your body sometimes cannot readily absorb. So they've now added a 5th nutrient. It's been, gosh, I guess about 20 years, 30 years now, but it took them like 10 or, no, more than that. It took them about 30 years to even decide that, hey, yeah, maybe we do have a problem. You know what it is? Folic acid. The rising incidence of birth defects caused them to relook at this situation again and realize, wow, we've lost a very viable source of folic acid. Yes, you can get it from green vegetables, but grains, remember, huge food group, encompasses a lot of food. Think about the grocery store. Produce and the milk and cheese and eggs is small compared to all those aisles that are grains. Huge food group, huge source of B vitamins and folic acid. And now we don't have it. And they traced it again to the problem with the white flour, so then they started putting folic acid in there. This is a huge problem. And if that were not enough, let's bleach the flour. We need to make it whiter than white. And I actually just read some things about the oxidation process will also naturally bleach the flour, and it will make the flour make fluffier bread. And so you can leave it there for days and it'll actually bleach on its own. But in the commercial industry, we don't have time to wait on this. We need to put some nitrogen trichloride in this. And did you hear the keyword chloride? You know, Clorox, chlorine, it's a chlorine derivative, just exactly like you bleach your laundry. They're bleaching our food. Nitrogen trichloride was taken off the market a good many years ago, but another chlorine derivative is still being used today. There was a British study done on a group of dogs where they fed them a diet of white bread, white flour somehow, I guess doggy food out of white flour. And the article said, the study said, at the end of 2 weeks, 2 weeks, not 100 years, 2 weeks, the dogs had, quote unquote, the running fits so severe some of them died. When I read that information, I could not help but think of the scourge of ADD and hyperactivity that we see in our country today. And I've had customers tell me that the doctor told her that chlorine was one of the worst offenders of ADD and hyperactivity. So they know it. They've made these connections. So what are we to do? I personally believe that buying a grain mill and grinding your own grain, if you never made another change in your diet, it would make significant health changes for you and your family. And that's why I begin there. It is so, so encompassing. It may seem hard and difficult. It is really, really not. I'm going to show you. I mean, you can grind more than a pound a minute, and we just turn it on, pour the grain in, and it comes out flour. And it encompasses so many things. Think about it. You start making the pancakes and the muffins and the bread and the cookies and the cakes for your family out of freshly ground grains. They start going to the bathroom. No one's constipated. Everybody's happy. They just need to get in the bathroom. That's the only thing. So, you know, it's an important first step. I'll never forget, I was speaking at a homeschool show, and this young mom, you could tell, she said, "This is my first year homeschooling, and can I just ask you a question?" And you could tell she was a little uptight, and she just looked at me, and I was speaking on healthy living. She goes, I just don't know if I can just do this. This is my first year. My kids are young. I'm homeschooling my children, and my friends all are doing this. They're grinding their wheat, making their own bread. And she goes, and they have chickens, and they milk goats, and they have a garden, and all. And she was just, you could tell. I mean, she was working herself into a frenzy. And finally, I just said, little chat room here. Look me. Look here. Look here. Just make the bread. Just make the bread, and don't worry about anything else. If you never make any other changes, you'll see remarkable health benefits. But I tell you what, in about a year doing this, you're going to have so much energy, you're going to start milking goats and having chickens. You're going to grow that garden. You're just going to be so happy. But that's, you know, you don't have to do all those things. I don't have goats. I don't have chickens. My daughter has chickens. But anyway, it's just amazing. And it may seem difficult, but like I said, and I can't stress it enough, I have never seen anything, and I've been studying healthy eating and healthy things for 30-something years, even before I went to college and since I left college and continued on my own. And it's the only food you really cannot get in the grocery store. So outside of milling your own or finding a reputable bakery, and I have to say reputable, like my kids' bakery, the Real Bread Company, that does grind the wheat fresh and doesn't take anything out or put anything in. There are some other bakeries that do grind their own grain, but some of their products have white flour in them, and so you have to be very, very careful. All of you, before I leave bread and move on to my next steps, and I've got about 10 minutes to wrap this up, I found this great article online, and it really encompasses so many things that I'm going to share with you, and even a little bit more. The whole grain is the buzzword now. The food industry, because what? Government studies show that whole grains reduce the risk of cancer, heart disease, diabetes. I think once again they went, okay, we got a problem. What's going on here? And they traced it to the new white flour. So they're like, okay, we need to be eating more whole grains. So the commercial food industry has jumped on this bandwagon. But let me just tell you something. Let me explain a couple of things to you. 20 years ago when I started teaching this, I had to explain the difference between white flour and freshly milled whole grain flour. Now I've got to explain the difference between store-bought whole grain flour and freshly milled whole grain flour. Here's the deal. Whole wheat. You've seen the bag of whole wheat flour? Whole wheat is not a legal term. It can literally be anything anyone wants it to be. It's not a legal term. That bag of whole wheat flour that you see in the store has been partially debranded and mostly degermed. It's the only way it can sit on the shelf. They have to get that oil out of there or it would spoil. And that's why, see, years ago, before I knew about milling my own, I would buy that bag of whole wheat flour. I knew that was healthier than white flour, and I was making all my own. I've made everything from scratch forever. But it was terrible. It was gritty and grimy and dense and heavy and falls apart, and cookies weren't fluffy and light and wonderful. And that's why when that mill came into my house, when I read the history of white flour and then the information in that first original medical journal that I read this information in, I went, I'm doing this. I'm an all or nothing kind of person. I went, I'm doing this. And Brad bought me a mill for my birthday, and I went, white flour is gone and it's never coming back in. I don't care if we have to choke this stuff down. It's that we're eating this. We're doing this, because I thought it was going to be like the stuff I was buying in the store. I could not believe the first flour that I ground and the first muffins I made. And I'm like, my goodness, these are light and fluffy. And I didn't have to put any white flour in there. The first cake, the first cookie, the first loaf of bread. And constipation was gone the first day. And it was like, woo! So, I mean, that's a huge issue. And constipation is no longer an old person's problem. I can't tell you how many people tell me that they started because their children were seriously constipated, 3 and 4 and 5 years old, seriously constipated. So that's your whole wheat, not a legal term. Whole grain. Whole grain is a legal term, but here's the deal. When the steel rolling mills came on the commercial scene, the mills are gone, okay, done with. So someone came up, though, with a formula for whole grain flour. But the flour is still made the same way. The white flour goes over here, the bran and germ goes over here. What they do to make legal whole grain flour is they recombine it. Someone came up with a standard formula, a legal formula for how much bran and germ has to be put back with that white flour. All right? Let's assume for a second, give them the benefit of the doubt, that whoever came up with the formula knew what they were doing and it's the right ratio of flour to fiber. All right? Let's just assume that for a minute. All right. The white flour portion of that kernel of grain is protein and starch. The protein portion is known as gluten. That gluten can be extracted from the starch portion and you can get just pure gluten. Here's the problem. Gluten extracted like that in the commercial industry is not considered flour. Legally, not considered flour. So, here's your homework for tonight or the next time you go to the grocery store. Find that 100% whole grain bread. Legally, the first ingredient has to be whole grain flour. But check out number 3, number 4, somewhere right in there, gluten. What? Gluten. What did they just do? And gluten's not a bad guy. Gluten is protein, okay? Gluten is not a bad guy. But when you put gluten in that whole grain flour, you just messed up that flour to fiber ratio that whole grain flour had to have. And here's what grieves me. Mark my word, if Jesus doesn't come back soon, you know what's going to happen is whole grain's going to lose their glamour because people are going to be going to the grocery store, buying the whole grain stuff that's there, and they're not going to see the health benefits. And so it's like, oh, well, you know, so that fad is going to come and go. I believe it. But here's the deal. You grind it, and you don't take anything out, and you're eating it the way it's supposed to be, in the right proportion, you're going to see cleansing, you're going to see nutritional, you're going to see health benefits like you've never imagined. We have so many testimonies. Like I said, cholesterol lowering, 85, 100 points in a month. Wart testimonies. That is probably one of the most intriguing to me, but it's because your immune system gets so strong you can fight that virus. Did you know warts are a manifestation of a viral infection? So if your child or you have warts on your hands and you've had them for 2 or 3 years, you have a virus, a contagious virus at that. So it's just amazing. So anyway, though this first step may seem hard, it is so worth it. Okay, so first step, real bread. Okay, I'm going to go over the others very, very quickly, and then we're going to cook a little bit. 2, many of us are concerned about what we eat and don't pay attention to what we drink. You are about 75% water. Guess what you need to be drinking? Water. I have a great article on my website, Drink Water. You need to be drinking half your body weight in ounces every day. Half your body weight. It is not only a transport vehicle, it is what your body uses to take nutrients into your cell. It's what your body uses to grab up waste and take them out of every cell in your body. In one of my classes, when I teach the Healthy Living Simplified 4-week class, I had a young man in my class. I called him up and I said, come here. I had a big bottle of orange soda. I said, I want you to go home, take this bottle of orange soda home this week, but your job is to wash your face and hands and your hair with it every day. And he was like, gross. And I'm like, then why do you think it can clean the inside of your body? It cannot. It cannot. The sugar, the salt, and all these drinks, the high sugar contents messes up the osmotic, relationship going on there. It cannot do the job of water. You need to be drinking water. One of the best times of the day I find to drink water, or that's so effective, first thing in the morning. Put a little squeeze of lemon in it. A cup of hot water is great if you want, but I have a cup in my bathroom When I get up in the morning and I go in the bathroom, I get a drink of water. First thing. I call it priming the pump. And everyone that's ever tried this and done this, if you have problems drinking your body weight, half your body weight in water, or you just find you just don't want water, try that. I call it priming the pump. What you'll find, first of all, it'll kind of thin out any of that mucus that maybe has built up in the night. The other thing that it does is I find that it makes you be able to better determine or differentiate between hunger and thirst throughout the day. And how many of y'all have ever had a pump or a well and you have to prime that pump? It also then makes you more thirsty throughout the day. You'll find that you'll grab that glass of water and you'll drink before you put any food in your mouth. And I kid you not, when I've not done that and I've started the day with eating even healthy food, I just find I don't drink as much. But if I'll start the day with that glass of water, that cup of water, and a lot of times when I have my quiet time, in the winter time, I don't drink caffeinated things. I don't drink coffee, herbal tea a little bit, but sometimes just a mug of hot water. Yesterday I was cold. We went out to lunch after church and I was really cold. And I said, can you just bring me a mug of hot water? Squeeze a lemon. I just sat there and I was just happy. And they're like, hot water? It's delicious. Try it. You'll be pleasantly surprised just sipping on that mug of hot water. So you need to drink your water. Number 3 is friendly bacteria. Gut bacteria, probiotics, whatever you want to call it. This is a huge problem in our country, that we have destroyed that good bacteria. And much of your immune system is that good gut bacteria. We tend to think of immune system as white blood cells, and white blood cells are fabulous for, being Pac-Man and cleaning things up. But I'm going to tell you, most of the battle for sickness goes on in your gut by this friendly bacteria that keeps pathogenic organisms and yeast organisms in check. And I believe, and as a food scientist, and my major was food microbiology, I took all my electives in microbiology and studied food poisoning and food pathogens and things like that. Food poisoning organisms have always been around. I mean, they're there. We learned about, poultry and things like that. Very prevalent. I think there's some things happening why we see so many outbreaks of food poisoning. Yeah, there could be some handling issues, but I think that most of it is in our own guts. That if we had this good bacteria in there, we could handle the exposure to the food poisoning organisms a little better. Some you're not. I mean, I've had food poisoning before, and it's not fun. But do you understand what I'm saying? Why such a scourge, and why you hear about it all the time now. And why is everyone concerned? You got to get that good bacteria in there. And yeast infections, heavy use of antibiotics in this country. Antibiotics sometimes are very, very necessary. Save your life sometimes. But you got to understand, they kill it all. They kill it all. Not just the bad guys. They kill everything there. So you need to be reestablishing that gut bacteria. How do we do that? Yogurt, kefir, fermented foods. Did you know that we, Americans, are one of the only ethnic groups in the world that does not have a fermented food as part of our regular diet? Other countries have fermented grain products. Germany has sauerkraut. Russia has kefir. Israel yogurt. I mean, this is a mainstay of their diets. They eat it every day. It is those organisms that can ferment those foods that can recolonize your gut. So you need to be doing that. If you don't want to do yogurt and kefir, then take a good probiotic. Of all supplements, that is probably a key one. And we sell one that I absolutely love. This is the best product that I have ever found. There's 13 organisms here. Don't get scared when I tell you this. 2 strains of yeast. Now, everybody, oh, I can't take that. I have yeast issues. But now think logically for a minute. If we're taking bacteria to help us protect us from pathogenic bacteria, why not 2 strains of yeast that are going to combat the candida that's bothering you? You understand what I'm saying? It's not those that give you yeast infections. It's the ones that can help keep that under control, okay? And The yeast actually is a very viable organism in your gut. It helps you break down and digest protein better, and it tends to break down the undigested protein that may be sitting in your gut. So it's very, very important. What I love about this product is it's not just the isolated organisms, it's grown on food. So it's green, looks like pond scum when you mix it up, and your kids are probably going to go, but put it in their smoothie with some purple fruit and they'll never know it's there. So, so that's a good product. Also, we have yogurt makers. You can make your own yogurt. Very, very easy to make your own yogurt. But one I'm really excited about lately is our Kefir starter cultures. These are phenomenal. Anybody doing the Kefir that, oh, just, don't you love it? It's just easy. It's a little packet. Sprinkle it in a quart of cold milk. You don't have to heat it like you do with the yogurt organisms. Stir it, leave it sitting on your counter for about 24 hours the first time you just made kefir. And the thing about kefir organisms is they can recolonize your gut. Yogurt, I just recently found out the organisms that make yogurt can't recolonize. They are very good for you to eat it when you're eating it. They produce enzymes, they produce natural antibiotics in the yogurt, full of B vitamins. So these things are very, very important. But this is really, really a huge part of being healthy. Number 4, all right, now I'm going to get to what you're hearing. Eat more fruits and vegetables. But see, everybody's talking about this. I can't tell you, I remember one of the first time when I was speaking somewhere, a guy came up to me and he goes, my wife's a vegetarian. She eats only fruits and vegetables, and she hates the bread in this country. She's Ethiopian, I believe, and she hates the bread, so she just eats fruits and vegetables. He said, but she's constipated. I'm like, really? I said, he goes, I'm just so excited. I'm going to try the bread. Well, he became a groupie there for a little while. He followed me around everywhere I spoke, and he sent me documentation in 1 month after changing to the bread, and so they were pretty healthy eaters. His cholesterol dropped about 93 points, his total cholesterol, and it was high in 1 month. And she became so excited because to find the way she could make bread like she was used to eating, but all of her constipation and her issues went away. So you need to eat more fruits and vegetables. Make a conscious effort to eat an apple instead of a bag of chips. Put a bowl of fruit on the table. Put grapes there. You as well as your children. It's not just a kid thing, but particularly you'll notice your kids, you're going to eat what's the easiest thing to get to. If there are chips in the cabinet, they're going to eat the chips in the cabinet. You will too, right? There's, you know, if there's cracker, if there's a cookie, something like. But if there's a bowl of fruit, there are no chips in the cabinet, you're going to eat the bowl of fruit. So start consciously thinking about, you know, I could eat a banana instead of that sweet cookie that I wanted, the brownie. I mean, every now and then, make a brownie and have some, you know what I'm saying? But that, like last night, I came in and I had eaten dinner, and I was sitting there and I was like, I just want something sweet. So my temptation was to go get something sweet. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go get a banana. And the next thing I know, I had a banana and I was fine. So, you know, make conscious choices like this. Make it available. Have it around. And then try to add vegetables to what you eat. One of my favorite recipes is my Caesar salad dressing in my red cookbook. I make it up like half a gallon at a time when I make it, and I've always got that in there, and we can always have a salad in nothing flat. And it's just so easy to put a salad. My kids love it, and it's nice. So, you know, make a conscious effort. We slice cucumbers and put some lime and salt and jalapenos, not jalapenos, little cayenne pepper makes this great dish, and my kids love it. So there's lots of things you can do. Make some of the dips and put that out and have carrots and stuff. I promise you, if you have those things and not the other things, they will eat those things. Splurge every now and then, have some chips and things around. But just remember, though, every compromise crowds out a healthy food, especially with your kids. They don't overeat too much. In fact, the biggest concern is spoiling their appetite. So just know that you just make a conscious effort to replace those sugary snacks with a piece of fruit. Okay, my number 5, exercise. How do you spell exercise? There we go. And you may be saying, what does that have to do with healthy eating? It's very, very important. Moving is very important. Being sedentary is very bad for your health. Your circulation, your lymph system does not have a pump. It depends on deep breathing and the movement of your bowels. So do you see how eating actually and moving actually affects your lymph system, which is a key part of getting rid of junk in your body. So you got to get moving. You know, it used to be that people worked. They did physical labor as their work, and now we find ourselves more sedentary. So we have to work at exercising and finding a way to exercise. So I'm not going to dwell on that too long but I just want to encourage you. If it's nothing but stretches, you know, in the morning, some deep knee bends. If the weather's bad and you can't go out, I do like 15 to 20 squats every morning. I just do it. I stretch every morning. I reach every morning. And 5 minutes. I mean, I love to go for a walk if I can and do some other things if I can. I have some exercise tapes that I try to do, but it's not always possible. But I at least do something to get myself moving and breathing deeply. Take the stairs. Park in the back part of the parking lot instead of, you know, fighting for that front spot. You know, I don't need to tell you all that. But all right, and then number 6, I'm going to write it right here. At some point, you're going to have to make some choices. Get rid of junk. You're going to have to look at that little thing that you like to eat in the afternoon, or that cup of something that you like to drink, or whatever, or that soda, or what, and say, you know what? This is really not promoting my health. And I personally think if you've started here and you're doing here, you know, and what if your thing is soda? Okay, let's just take that. What if you drank a glass, every time you start to reach for a soda, what if you said, okay, I'm going to drink a glass of water before I get my soda, and then I'll go get my soda? Won't be long, you'll start preferring the water. I'm not kidding, you will. You may not think so now, but you will. Bubbly sodas, sugar, caffeine, very, very addicting. I mean, it's more than just caffeine. It's more than just the sugar. It's the whole bubbly, the whole sensation going on. If you really got a problem with that, we got a bubbler out there. You can bubble herbal tea, and it tastes just like a really natural soda. It's pretty cool. But anyway, so those are things that you got to make some choices and say, you know what? And you're going to splurge every now and then. You have dessert out. And we are not purists by any stretch of the imagination. But those are the exceptions and not the norm. This is, you know, that right now we've had dance going on and drama going on. And I said to my husband that day, I'm like, when did we eat together the last time, you know? And it really was the day before. I didn't count it because we had leftovers, you know? And so I was like, when did I cook a big meal? So, you know, there are times, there are seasons. Now, when you go out, try to make, you know, wise choices. But it's going to happen. But at some point, you got to go, you know what, this is not good for me. And I'm just going to have to do away with it. And then number 7, this is a big one. So here, we're working and exercising, but I'm telling you, we have got to learn to do this. We have got to learn to rest. You got to learn to just shut it down. Shut it down, turn it off, go to bed. Tomorrow's another day. And you know, there are times when you're going to have to pull some late-nighters. I did last week. I stayed up till 3:30 in the morning, got up at 6:30, getting ready for my holiday class, writing. I had to. You know, Jesus even talked about when the Pharisees were trying to get him all, you know, hepped up on not following the Sabbath. He said, you know, if your friend's ox falls in or if your ox falls in a ditch, you're going to get your ox out of a ditch. So I say, I had to get my ox out of a ditch last Sunday night. You know, so there's times when, yeah, you're going to have to work through. But guess what I did? The day after the class, I literally laid on my bed and stared at the ceiling. I didn't read. I didn't even watch TV. I just laid there. I couldn't. I was too tired to even hold up the book because I'd been going, adrenaline. And, you know, even adrenaline, you know, pumps you up, and the excitement and all that. But those are those natural things that God puts in us to help us to get our jobs done. But we got to learn to turn out the light. And resting is a daily thing. Breaking the fast, you know, try not to eat so late at night. That gives your digestive system a rest. And then there's a weekly thing, and so and sleeping at night. You know, we need to do those things. All right, so that's my 7 steps. They're pretty easy, aren't they? I mean, this isn't weird. So I didn't tell you had to become a vegetarian, that you had to eat everything raw. I didn't give you any percentages of all that. Honestly, It just does not have to be that complicated. Eat what you want. Just start trying to make those things that you want real. You know, make those wiser choices. All right, I'm going to slide. Huh? We could. You could. He's going to serve some bread for you. You can if you want. I'm not going to. Okay. Not going to be that much longer. We're going to whip up some black-eyed peas and rice. One of the things with the whole grains being the first step, some of you, may not be able to get a grain mill, or grinding your wheat and making your own flour may seem a little overwhelming. I'm going to show you how it is not overwhelming at all. It is so easy. And here's the deal too. Once the flour is milled, like I told you, the nutrients begin to oxidize. But once the bread is baked, from everything I've read, the nutritional loss is minimal. So if you work or you have a really busy schedule, you see, you could actually make the muffins or make the bread and freeze them. Pick a day when you can and make a lot at once, and then you've got it. So, but there's some great things you can do outside of even grinding your own and making flour. What about brown rice? What about beans? What about the oatmeal that you had this morning? That was dump it in a pot and put some milk and water. That recipe, by the way, came from our one of our new cookbooks called Shamrock and Peach, written by Judith McLaughlin from Ireland. And I just really think it's, my oldest daughter, has never liked oatmeal. And we served that in the Irish class, and she went, okay, what was that? And I like that. Of course, I don't know if it was the whiskey sauce we poured over it, but hey, whatever makes you eat that whole grain stuff, So anyway, but actually it was great. So, but some things, great things are brown rice and beans, oatmeal. That's why if you read information out there and they say eat more whole grains, guess what they're going to tell you? Oatmeal. Why? Because you can buy oatmeal in the grocery store. All right. So you can do that. You can typically buy dry beans in the grocery store. So those are things that you can get in the grocery store. But remember, the whole grain products, and that handout I gave you is very enlightening, talking about made with whole grain, so many grams of whole grain, whatever that means. I mean, you'll find that all that labeling is not what you're thinking it is. But anyway, I wanted to make for you, I want you to see, first thing, how easy it is to put on a pot of rice and beans. Now, I love pressure cooking. I absolutely love pressure cooking. And I don't know how anyone lives without one now. I certainly don't know how to live without one because it just makes cooking so fast and easy. So I'm just going to turn my pressure cooker on, get it hot here. It makes cooking, it reduces the cooking time by as much as a fourth to a third. Like brown rice normally takes an hour to cook on the stove. And you can just bring the water up to a boil, put your brown rice in, turn it down to a nice simmer, put a lid on it, and just set your timer. Go away, forget it, and in an hour come back and it's ready. But in a pressure cooker, it's ready in 20 minutes. So I can have this dish of black-eyed peas and brown rice on the table in less than 30 minutes. So I'm just going to show you, this is one of our brown rice medleys, which, by the way, we sell just about every kind of grain you can imagine and just about every kind of bean you can imagine. So we have it all. We have it in big buckets, and we have it in little bags, and we have it in 1-gallon pails. So we have a way to meet your needs and your budget or whatever you need. So I'm going to just put about a cup of this rice medley. And there's two schools of thought with making brown rice. Some people kind of toast it a little bit in the oil. Some people just bring the water to boil and dump it in that way. It just depends on how you like it. And now I'm going to put a cup of the black-eyed peas. Oh, boy, just whatever. So I'm going to stir this around a little bit just to get it coated with the oil. I put that out for me and did. Okay, and I'm going to put about a teaspoon of salt. And then I'm going to put, I love using, this is some dip mixes that we sell. and I've fallen in love with these. They're just dried vegetables and herbs, and this one is carrots, onion, garlics, leeks, tomatoes, parsley, peas, green peppers, beans, and herbs. Has no MSG, no salt, no sugar. You can make all kinds of dip mixes with these, but I love using this one to flavor my peas and rice. So I'm going to use about 3 to 4 tablespoons. And then I'm going to use beef broth here. You could certainly use chicken broth. So I'm just going to add the broth. And it's about 4 cups because you got your, typically when you're boiling grains, it's 2 parts liquid to 1 part grain. And the same with your peas or beans. So because I used a cup of rice and a cup of the peas, then I'm using 4 cups of liquid. And I'm choosing beef broth. Like I said, you could really use chicken broth. You could use water. You could use whatever you want here, as long as it's a nice liquid. And now I'm going to put a little pepper. Okay. And then all we're going to do with our pressure cooker, these are our Fissler pressure cookers. And we're just going to match the little circle here to the dot here on the handle. Just match that up, twist it. That locks the lid, or that shuts the lid. And now this little blue lever here locks the lid into place. Now I cannot open it, and that allows the pressure to build inside. What you do when you pressure cook, when you build pressure inside the pot, it raises the boiling point of water. So this is going to cook hotter. That's how you cook with a pressure cooker. I absolutely cook everything just about in a pressure cooker, other than oatmeal, grits, and spinach. Those are bad, and fish. Don't need a pressure cooker for those things, but I love cooking in a pressure cooker. When you lock that lever into place, it engages the little valve that will release the steam, and then it'll start building the pressure in just a few minutes. So we're going to just let the pressure build here, and that's all we need to do for our black-eyed peas and rice. And then as soon as this starts coming up to pressure, I'll show it to you again. All right, so now I'm going to mill some flour for you. This is one of the grain mills, the electric grain mills that we sell. This is the Wonder Mill. Very, very easy to use. You got a cup that goes, attaches to the lid, and it's got a little flat side right there. I don't know if you can tell the little flat side of the cup. Got a little tab here. You match the flat side of the cup up to the tab. I actually think the newer ones have an arrow on the cup and an arrow on the lid, and you just match those up. It doesn't screw or anything. It just snaps into place. You snap the lid into place onto the canister. Make sure it snaps all the way down. It has a little foam sponge filter here that goes in the top so no fine flour will blow out. Then it's got this little tube that you just twist and you insert in the port here. This is your grain hopper. This mill holds 8 cups of grain. A cup of grain makes a cup and a half of flour. So 8 cups of grain is going to make 12 cups of flour. All right? So I'm going to mill some grain for you. These are our buckets of wheat. I gave you a basic list of getting started items, and there's 2 varieties of wheat, red wheat and white wheat, and then there's hard wheat and there's soft wheat. I don't have time to get into all of that today, but it is in my red cookbook. Basically, in a nutshell, you're going to want to use hard wheat if you're making yeast bread, and soft wheat is your pastry flour for your cakes and cookies and things like that. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to mill this flour. All you have to do on this mill, you want to turn it on, pour your grain in, and like I said, this will hold 8 cups of grain, so that'll mill into 12 cups of flour. The grain drops down. Now listen, for the pitch change, hear the pitch go up, let it run a few seconds. This is what I love about this mill. You just cleaned your mill. How about that? It's no cleaning to this mill. And I'm going to pass this around and let you see the flour, the static electricity there. I don't know if you can see from where you're sitting, if I hold it maybe this way, you can see the coarse bran is right here. So it does kind of separate even the way it mills, and then your fluffier flour is there. But so I'm going to pass this around. Y'all feel free to, you can put your hand in it, do whatever you want. I won't use this. But you can look at it. And that's red wheat. There's basically two varieties of wheat. There's hard wheat and there's soft wheat. And I'm sorry, there's two kinds of wheat, hard wheat and soft wheat. And then there's two varieties, red wheat and white wheat. Your red wheat is a little heartier, nuttier flavor, and your white wheat is a little milder, blander flavor. But again, you want to use your your hard wheat when you're making yeast bread. Okay, when I first started milling my wheat and making my own bread, I was a stay-at-home mom. I had 5 young children. 5. I've had 2 since then, and then adopted 2, so I now have 9. And I homeschool my children, so I was home with them all day. I was a busy, busy mom. I had 3 children in 3 years because I decided to let the Lord control how many children I have, and I don't think He controlled it at all. So not the way I was thinking anyway. So I had 3 children. My number 3, 4, and 5 are just like little stair step. They're 18 months apart. And so that's when I got introduced to milling my wheat and making my own bread. But when I read that information, I knew from my biochemistry, my physiology, and my food science background, I went, this is real. This makes sense. And, I used to, like I told you earlier, I used to get nervous when doctors were in the room, because I was like, what if not that I'm not concerned about saying something wrong, but I thought they're going to find something wrong with what I'm saying. Every one of them came up over and over and said, what you're saying is absolutely correct. Okay, I want you to look, hang on, pause that. Time out for station identification here. See how this valve has come up, and I don't know if you can see where you are. There's 2 little white rings. That's high pressure. So now I want to turn the heat down to about medium low, and all I need is just to maintain that pressure. And these pressure cookers are perfectly safe. You will never explode them. You're not going to be Lucy and Ethel with the chicken on the ceiling. Not going to happen, because you see, I don't know if you can see where you are. See the steam here? That's one of the safety mechanisms of letting out too much pressure. But in just a few minutes, it'll drop on down, and it'll quit doing that once the temperature of the burner drops. It'll quit releasing that pressure. So all I want to do is now I'm going to cook it on low heat. I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes. I don't know if I have my little egg timer up here that I love so much. Okay, that's going to cook for 20 minutes, so we'll just let it cook, and we're going to make some muffins. So anyway, with my 5 children, my busy schedule, things had to be easy for me. And like I said, I already cooked. I grew up cooking. My mother cooked, and I made from scratch everything we made. I didn't make all of my yeast bread at the time, but I did because I wanted whole wheat bread, so I would make, go buy flour and make yeast rolls when I was having something special for dinner. But when I read this information, I thought, that's it. I'm making it all. It's just, and I'm going to tell you, we started in 1991, and I have not bought a loaf of bread in all 20 years. And we get white flour a little bit out and about when we have to eat out and can't make some of the choices that we would rather make. Rarely do we eat fast food, but it happens every now and then. I've been known to take my bun into Chick-fil-A or into Burger King and put that burger on my bun. That didn't sound right, but anyway, I've been known to do that. It embarrasses my children, but you know what? I don't care. I'd rather do that than be constipated the next day. So there you have it. And when they get as old as me, they'll understand. Right now, they just think that, their internal things can just handle all this stuff. But when you get to be our age and you start falling apart faster than you're growing, it just, you have to move on. But I don't know why I went there, but anyway, so I had to keep it simple. It had to be doable. It had to be easy because, like I said, I was schooling my children. I had, young ones, so it had to be easy. So I really started with 4 basic recipes, and my red cookbook is actually a collection of recipes that I had in those first few years that I converted from white flour, white sugar to all whole grain and honey a few in there with sucanat and honey granules. But it had to be easy, and I had 4 basic recipes. I had a basic bread dough. Didn't take me long to figure out you don't need a whole bunch of bread dough recipes. You don't need a cinnamon bread recipe, a raisin bread recipe, a hamburger bun recipe, a dinner roll. You don't. It's all the same. It's yeast dough. You know, find one that works and that you like and that works well for you, and use it for everything. So that basic bread dough recipe in my red cookbook is what I use for donuts, cinnamon rolls, pizza dough. Well, I have discovered a pizza dough that I like better now. We'll do a pizza class after the first of the year. But anyway, for years, that's what I've used. I just leave out the honey. I mean, yeast breads are very adaptable. You can do all kinds of things with them. Southerners are scared of yeast breads, but my mother's never made yeast bread in her life and thinks she can't do it. I promise you, it's harder to make cakes and biscuits than it is yeast dough, once you figure it out. But I mean, you can leave out the honey. You can put in more oil. You can put in less water. It's just going to take more flour, and you can dump all that extra flour in there. So anyway, I started out with a basic yeast bread recipe. I started out with a pancake recipe, a muffin recipe, and a coffee cake recipe. And those were my 4 basic recipes. And you'll see them all, the 4 of them are in my cookbook. My muffin recipe, again, you don't need a million muffin recipes. Look at them. They're basically the same. And I found one that was easy to memorize, 2 1/4 cups of flour. So I'm going to do it for you right here. And the nice thing about muffins is they stir up in 5 minutes and they bake in 15. So you can literally have bread on the table in just a few minutes. So you don't have time to make yeast bread, or you don't have a wonderful bread machine or a mixer or something like that, make muffins. And if you have my cookbook, you'll see that there's all kinds of variations to my muffin recipe, and I'm still coming up with variations to that. And a lot of times it was, how can I make today's muffins not look like yesterday's muffins? Because that was the only bread we were getting on the table. So I want to show you how easy that recipe is. We're going to measure 2 1/4 cups of flour. So there's 1. There's 2, which, by the way, I don't know if y'all have noticed these measuring cups. I absolutely love them. They're called the flippers. It's a whole line. It's the measuring spoon and the cups. This is a 1 cup. That's a 1/2 cup. Who cool. This is 2/3 of a cup. That's 1/3 of a cup. This is a 1/4 cup, and that's your 1/8. So that's all you need are these 3 measuring cups. Isn't that just the coolest thing? So I need 2 1/4 cups of flour here. They're called flippers. And the same with the measuring spoon. You don't need any other spoon but this. This is a tablespoon. This is a teaspoon. That's a 1/2 tablespoon, and that's a 1/2 teaspoon. You really can get, because a 1/2 tablespoon is 1 1/2 teaspoons, just so you know. So, all right, look how easy this muffin recipe is. And I found it. It was a white flour recipe that I had been using for years, and it is just so easy. It's a teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of baking powder, teaspoon of baking soda. There you have it. That's your dry ingredients. And with a quick bread, you just want to put your dry ingredients in. You don't need a fancy mixer, wire whisk, and a bowl. I have fancy mixers. To make muffins, you don't need it. So you're just going to whisk in the dry ingredients. And now this recipe calls for 1 egg. I think I was going to double this. Do I need to double this? Caleb, how many people do we have? Okay, all right. So I'm going to do 1 egg. And then it's a 1/2 cup of oil, 1/2 cup of honey. I use olive oil for all my liquid oils. Whenever you're working with honey, you want to measure your oil first. So it's a 1/2 cup of oil. I mean, how easy is this? 1/2 cup of oil. If it's equivalent fractions, do y'all remember what equivalent fractions are? Be a little difficult if it was 1/3 cup of oil and 1/4 cup of honey, but it's a 1/2 cup of oil, 1/2 cup of honey. So this way I can put my oil in there and I can measure my honey right on top. I'm using a sweet, mild honey called sage honey, and it's one that diabetics can tend to tolerate a little better than some of the others. See, I've made a well in the center of my dry ingredients. I'm going to put my oil and honey in there. And then it calls for a cup of buttermilk. But since kefir is so easy to make, I'm going to use kefir instead. Here's my kefir. I've got to where I just do kefir now. I just keep it around. That way I can drink it. And I'm going to make y'all a smoothie when we start eating all this. Because a smoothie is the best way to get that good bacteria using kefir or yogurt in your body. So I'm going to just use my kefir for my 1 cup of buttermilk. Anytime with a quick bread, you can use just baking powder if you want, but if you use baking soda, it's activated by an acid. So that's why whenever you have soda, you're going to have to use buttermilk or something like that. So I'm going to just put my buttermilk in, stir this up. Hey, Caleb, would you do me a big favor? Would you go get me a 2-pound bag of millet? I wanted to put some millet in here. 2 parts red, 1 part white. I'm gonna show them when I make it. Okay. I usually put it in the refrigerator or the freezer. Just put it in a Ziploc bag and just keep it in the refrigerator or freezer. And that's what I use on my counter when I'm making biscuit. I'll dust my counter with it. But if you know that a cup of grain makes 1.5 cups of flour, I kind of calculate it. And like my basic bread dough recipe, the yeast bread recipe is 4.5 cups of flour. So that's 3 cups of grain. So I just measure the grain and mill that, and then that's pretty much, you know, I know that that's what I'm going to use. Okay, I thought I would make some banana millet muffins for you. Millet is a grain that can easily be boiled and eaten, and it's a staple grain in other countries, but we feed the birds millet. This is birdseed. If you've ever, okay, now I'm not feeding you birdseed. We are feeding birds one of the most nutritious grains out there. And it's why we are dying of cancer and they are not. It has one of the broadest spectrum of B vitamins, particularly vitamin B17. Another name for vitamin B17 is Laetrile. Laetrile is the controversial cancer treatment that's legislated illegal to be used in this country, and it's B17. So I'm going to put some millet in there, and I thought I would do some bananas. So this is my basic recipe. I'm just kind of kicking it up a little bit here. This is my little food chopper that I love for egg salad and nuts and bananas, and it's a great way to get the kids to chop onions. I'm going to just put 2 bananas. You can put a cup of pumpkin in here, a cup of blueberries, just whatever in the muffin recipe. Add some spices. Okay, so here's my food chopper. Isn't that the coolest thing? Your kids can help. Yeah, you're getting some exercise, and your kids can do it without, you know, getting in there with the knife. So there's our bananas. I had to make lunch for my kids the other morning. They go to a homeschool program twice a week, Mondays and Wednesdays, and I have to make lunch. So I did egg salad. Got up, boiled the eggs, and oh man, it was great for how I used to stand there with a fork and mash up those eggs. 3 would go in here perfectly, and just a couple of pulls, and it was perfect. Oh yes, onions. It'll even do ice. It'll do salsa. It'll do all kinds of things with it. This morning, I have to, in fact, in your recipe book, hang on, let me get some, I'm going to put a little cinnamon and nutmeg. Sorry, I forgot to get my, I'm going to put just a little cinnamon and nutmeg in here. And these are our line of spices that we carry. Oh my goodness, you've got to smell these. These are just, they're not like the store-bought stuff. A little dash of nutmeg, doesn't take much nutmeg. I'll leave these out on the counter and y'all can smell them at the end of class. Somebody was asking me something. Did I answer you? And I'm a little bit of vanilla. And these are our organic flavorings. Just about a teaspoon. Carefully measure that now. So, and then just kind of stir this in. And even with making it something other than the plain muffins, that just did not take very long at all. And now I'm going to dip this into my muffin pans. And I absolutely love our USA truly non-stick cookware. And guess why it's called USA? Made in the USA. Love it when we can get something that's made in the USA. It's silicone coated, and it does not need any spray at all. I don't know where this friend was all those years when I was making muffins. I did not discover this for scooping muffins until about 5 years ago. I'm like, really, really, really? Watch this. Boop. I used to take the two and then have to go divvy it all back out. We may still have to divvy a little at the end. Adding the bananas increases the volume just a little bit. So you could either make more muffins or just add more to here to the cups and make bigger muffins, which is what I will choose to do. But I'm like, how fast is that? And I used to spoon it in. Even when we used to do seminars for 200 people. I'm like, what was I thinking? So see, y'all might think I'm really smart. Got you fooled. Okay, so what I do now is I just kind of go through and add just a little bit more. Alrighty. So these are going to bake in 15 minutes. Adding the banana may increase the baking time just a little bit because of the moisture that it adds there. But you can just check them in 15 and see. Find blueberries, things like that, or if I put fresh apples and cinnamon in here. And see, now why I love this recipe, it's very forgiving. I've not found anything I couldn't do to this recipe. I've added chocolate chips and raspberries. One of my favorites is corn muffins. Let me get them in the oven because you're going to eat these before you go. All right. What? Huh? 400. Yep. Muffins, your quick breads typically cook at a higher temperature because quick breads, what a higher temperature does is it gets the outside nice and done and the inside stays moist. When you've got your denser breads like your yeast breads, you're going to have to cook them a little more slowly so that that inside gets done. But your quick breads rise very rapidly in the oven, and so you can cook them at a higher temperature. And that's the other thing, that higher temperature, putting them in that hot oven activates that baking powder again. So your baking powder, I choose to use the Rumford because it doesn't have any aluminum in it, and it's a double acting baking powder. And what double acting means, the first acting is when you put the liquids in there. And you saw how that the whole batter kind of fluffed up, and you'll see that. So that's your first acting with a double acting baking powder. Then the second acting is when the heat from the oven. So that's why a quick bread does nicely if you kind of put it in a hot oven, so it'll get that oomph, that little extra rise there. All right, so that is our banana millet muffins, and that flour was actually, let me come back around and get it, an Ezekiel mix flour. Recipe in my book, this is a recipe I discovered years ago for Ezekiel bread. And Ezekiel, in the 4th chapter of Ezekiel, God tells Ezekiel to take wheat, spelt, barley, millet, lentils, and beans. I mean, it's listed there, and it says grind them, put them into one vessel and grind them and make a cake out of it. I think that whole one vessel means wheat used to be made into bread, spelt used to be used for bread, barley was used for bread. All those grains and things were eaten and used separately to make breads and cakes and things like that. God's saying, I want you to combine all these and make one cake out of it, okay, out of all these things combined. And years ago, before I ever even started milling my wheat, making my bread, milling my grains, I found a book. It was called God's Recipe, and she felt like that God had given her the proportions of that wheat, spelt, barley, millet, lentils, and beans. And that's the recipe in my cookbook. And that recipe is the only recipe in my cookbook that is the measurement are grains, not flour. Everything else is flour. But that recipe, you measure out the whole grains, and you mill all of this into flour, and you use all of that flour in the recipe. And we sell it bagged up. This is one recipe. This is 2.5 cups of wheat, 1.5 cups of spelt, whatever. It's everything that's listed in that recipe, and we sell it like this. Well, I love the bread, and the bread is very heavy, though, and very dense and very sweet. It's a very sweet bread, and for the longest time, I wouldn't serve it when we would go out because I didn't want people to think that whole grain had to be dense and heavy. But I'll never forget the first time I served it somewhere, people were like, this is the best bread I've ever tasted. It's very sweet, very satisfying. It's called a fasting bread because it appears in the scriptures that Ezekiel fasted on this bread. He was to eat an 8-ounce cake and a quart of water at a set time every day, and he was praying and interceding for Israel and the divided kingdom of Israel at the time. And it looks as though that's all he ate. I don't know, but that's the way it appears. And he did this for over 400 days. So it's a very, very nutritious bread. The combination of grains and beans here makes this a complete protein. Well, like I said, I love the bread. It's a very sweet, very satisfying bread. It's a great bread if you ever do feel called to fast, or if you want to have a day of fasting, but maybe blood sugar issues or medication issues, you can't go totally without food. This is a great, great bread to eat as a fasting bread. Very, very satisfying. But I get a little bit tired of the sweetness and the heaviness of it. So I actually had a customer made this suggestion to me. She had hypoglycemia. And she said, oh my goodness, the Ezekiel bread has so helped me with that. And she said, but I got tired of the heavy, sweet Ezekiel bread. So she said, I started grinding the mixture into flour and making muffins out of it. And she said, I made little mini muffins, and then I froze 2 in Ziploc bags, 2 muffins per bag, left them in my freezer. She said, I work, so I'd have my bake day on Saturday. She said, so when I leave the house in the morning, I grab me 2 little baggies of these Ezekiel muffins. And she said, when it's time for my snack that I need to have to keep my blood sugar from dropping, she said, I just have been eating these muffins. She said, my blood sugar has just stabilized. I'm not having those rise and drops. Whole grains are key to stabilizing blood sugar. And that's another thing you're told. Bread's bad, bad, bad if you have blood sugar issues. I'm telling you, yeah, the bread out there is, but true whole grain bread and real fruits and vegetables are key to keeping that blood sugar regulated. Hang on, I got a beeper back here. I think that's the black-eyed peas and rice. Yep, and I forgot to set my timer on here. It would have turned itself off. So I'm going to turn it off. And that will just, you can let the pressure just naturally release. So it's not on the heat anymore, so the pressure will just come down on its own. So anyway, I have fallen in love with using this Ezekiel mix. Combination of grains and beans makes a complete protein. So it's just great. It's great for that person that does have blood sugar problems, that's concerned about getting protein, but at the same time, it's the good carbohydrates and the good fiber that's going to help stabilize that blood sugar. So I have discovered grinding this into flour and using that flour for pumpkin waffles. Those were the Ezekiel flour. That's what you had. So muffins. So that's what I use to make the banana millet muffins. Cookies, brownies. Ezekiel brownies are amazing. The batter tastes gross because the batter tastes like raw beans. It's really funny, but you won't taste it at all once it bakes. So if you're one of those that really likes to lick your brownie batter, go ahead and use soft wheat for that or spelt. Because the first time I tasted the batter made with Ezekiel flour, I was like, okay, that tastes like a green bean, like a raw, you know, it just tastes that raw beanie kind of taste. But oh my goodness, they're absolutely delicious, made into brownies and things like that. Okay. It doesn't matter. I find with the electric mills, they grind so fine that it really, really doesn't matter. Especially the Wonder Mill grinds everything pretty fine, even on the coarsest setting. The Nutri-Mill, you can get a little broader spectrum, so I probably would, go more towards the finer setting on that mill. Yes? Well, the whole thing is you want to, hold on just a minute, you want to grind your flour when you're ready to use it. But it's so funny. I had this one lady, she said, I grind it, in my basement. She said, because I don't have a place to keep my mill in the kitchen. And she said, so I grind it down there. And she goes, and I run up really fast because I thought you said I had to use it within 30 minutes. I'm like, where did you get that? I didn't, So I don't want anybody to get all stressed out, because we know prior to the 1900s, they didn't run home and make, their flour, make all their bread in one sitting or whatever. They did use it up fairly quickly. But my mill sits on my counter. You see how fast and easy it is to mill. So I mill when I'm ready to use it. And I think that is the ideal situation. If that doesn't work for you, then I would certainly put it in the refrigerator. Here's the deal, though. You are losing nutrients, immediately. And we saw that in 3 days, you've lost about 90%. And I'll never forget studying the works of Dr. Wilfred Shute. He was a world-renowned cardiologist, and he pioneered the research on vitamin E. In fact, he was a nationally known speaker. He was actually Canadian, but he spoke all over the world at cardiologist conventions. And when he started discovering and working with vitamin E, he basically said, I have found the treatment for heart disease. And I believe it's Psalm 104 says that God gave man bread to strengthen and nourish the heart. And here was this medical doctor, and this is what he was saying. And then his brother was also a doctor, and he was working with using vitamin E to prevent blood clots and these types of things. They are why vitamin E is on the map, so to speak. They just found that it really prevented oxidation and things like that. But I'll never forget, in reading his works and his books, this is what caught my eye. He said he was very excited once vitamin E became encapsulated, because he said, until that point, he was using wheat germ oil as his source of vitamin E. Here's what caught my eye. He said the only problem was, after 3 days, there was not enough viable vitamin E in that wheat germ oil to make it be therapeutic. So, to answer your question, do what you have to do. Just know your goal should be mill it and use it, and I measure it. And I'm fixing to show you how to put on a batch of bread dough in the bread machine. But I would certainly try to use it, within a day or two of milling it. For sure, keep it in the refrigerator. But I would imagine he was keeping that wheat germ oil in the refrigerator. Oils oxidize very quickly, and this flour has a lot of oil in it. I've always milled my flour fresh, but I know that years ago we put a mill at our church so that people that couldn't afford a mill could come to the church and mill flour. And we had a friend that was, and she said, you know what's funny? She said, I come home that day and I make muffins. And she said, the next day when I make muffins, I can taste the difference. And I was like, really? Because I've never done that. I've always had my mill right there. And I'll never forget when our seminars that we took on the road that finally just got really big, I had to mill the flour the day before. And I milled all the grits. And my son, David, absolutely loves grits, fresh ground grits. And but I had to mill them the day before. And he was not very old. He was probably 9 or 10. And he came up to me at the seminar, and we had made the grits for breakfast. We catered the meal and did the seminar with breakfast and lunch. And I made the grits, and he said, these are not as good as the grits at home. In just 24 hours, he could taste the difference. So, how fast does an apple turn dark? We do know that putting, nuts and things in the refrigerator and freezer does slow the oxidation of the oils, but we also know that apple turns dark whether you put it in the refrigerator or not. So I don't know how much is lost. You know, I just know that when I read that from Dr. Shute, I was like, wow, that says a lot right there. So anyway, well, I wanna do one last thing for you while we're waiting on our. Is it 10 to 1? Tell me that's right. Okay, good. All of a sudden I was like, is it 10 to 2? Surely I didn't go an hour over. Okay. Wow, I'm amazing myself here. I want to just show you kind of my routine if I'm going to make bread. Now, when I first started, I used a mixer because for me a mixer was just the easiest thing for my family. A bread machine, we would consume that loaf in one sitting because there was 9 or 7 of us, and then I added 2 more children. So my children are, the oldest is 31, my youngest is 15. I have 7 biological children, and then this last 2 years we've adopted 2 sons, and they are 16 and 17. So my baby is still my baby. So Caleb's not over there. Caleb is my second born. Joshua out there in the store is my third born. So anyway, the others aren't here, but I don't know what I was going to tell you there. But I found that for me, a mixer and making 6 loaves of bread, yeast bread at a time, worked very well. I could have a day where I'd make that, and then we would eat on those 6 loaves. Sometimes I would, and this is how I discovered you didn't need, you know, raisin bread dough, you didn't need cinnamon roll dough, you didn't need dinner roll dough. I would make a big batch of dough, and I would make some into sweetbreads for breakfast. I'd make a couple of sandwich loaves, and then I'd make some couple of dinner rolls or hamburger buns or that kind of thing, all out of that big batch of dough. And in my Getting Started class, which we'll have one, I think it's the 16th of whatever, that 3rd week of January, we'll get that on the calendar in the next few weeks. And if you aren't on our email newsletter, which I assume most of you probably are, be sure to subscribe to that because you'll get a newsletter soon with our January lineup of classes. But that's what worked for me. But I realize, and I tell people now, if you are in and out a lot or you have a small family, maybe a bread machine would work for you. You can always knead bread dough by hand, but I will tell you this, there is some specific advantages to having a machine knead it for you because it's going to knead it no matter how sticky the dough is, whereas if you have to knead it by hand, you have to keep adding flour and to keep it from sticking to your hand, so you're going to get a little heavier, denser loaf of bread. So I do love having a machine to knead it, but know that you can make very good bread just kneading by hand. This is the key. If knowing what I know now, if I had to grind my wheat by hand, I would do it. If I had to pound 2 rocks together, I would do it. It's worth it to me, so I would do it. I praise God for my electric mill that I don't have to do this. But so this is the key. Again, we're going to just tighten our lid down, snap our lid down, and I'm going to grind the wheat for my basic bread dough. My basic bread dough is, I don't know where, is 4½ cups of flour. So I've discovered if I'm going to use the bread machine, I'm going to use exactly 4½ cups of flour. Now, if I use a mixer, there's some tricks that you determine when you've got enough flour. Pause. My timer's going off. I'm going to check my muffins. Oh, they're looking good. I think they can go just about 3 or 4 more minutes. Okay. So, but with the bread machine, this is how easy. I just wanted you to see how easy a bread machine is. We sell the Zoharushi. How many of y'all have bread machines already? They're great. They're wonderful. You know, most of the bread machines out there are not built to last and use a lot. That's why we have chosen to sell the Zoharushi. And I tell people, that doesn't mean you have to get rid of yours and buy this one. But just know that if you start using your bread machine this way, it may wear out sooner than you thought. Maybe you've had it already 10 years. You're like, well, you know, I make 1 loaf of bread every year. When you start making a lot of loaves of bread, you know, you might wear it out. And so we really, really recommend the Zoharushi. It's got a strong enough motor. It's built to use a lot. And the motor can handle the extra kneading that the whole wheat requires. It's got 2 paddles and a nice 2-pound loaf pan. So what I'm going to do, what you want to do when you're making bread in a bread machine is you want to just put the ingredients in the way they're listed in the recipe. And my basic recipe was made to fit this bread machine. Now, when I'm making bread, I may double or triple or even quadruple it in my mixer and then make more loaves at a time. Also, the bread machine has a dough cycle, so if you wanted to take it out and make pizza dough, you know, let it knead the dough for you and make cinnamon rolls or donuts or whatever. It's very easy to do that. But if you want to just let it go through the whole baking cycle, it's got all that too. Another nice thing about the Zoharushi is it's got a homemade cycle, which you can program it. And that's one of the key, I think one of the biggest advantages to the Zoharushi is being able to program it, because on a warm day it's going to rise faster. On a cold day it's going to rise slower. So being able to change those rising times is critical to getting a good loaf. So if you've ever had a great loaf, you're like, wow, the loaf's great today, and then other days you come back and it looks like a crater, you know, it's sunk in, that's because it rose too much before the baking cycle kicked in. So what I'm going to do is I need 4½ cups of flour, and so I'm going to mill 3 cups of grain, because that will make 4½ cups of flour. And I like using part red and part white. The red gives me the good nutty flavor, and the white makes a little fluffier loaf of bread. And I'm not talking white flour, I'm talking white wheat here. So I've used 2 parts red and 1 part white wheat. So I'm just going to turn my mill on. And I want you to see how fast you can mill to make a loaf of bread. So while that's milling, and this is kind of my routine, I get my flour milling, I'm going to put in my other ingredients. The nice thing about the Zoharushi is I don't need to worry about warm water. It's got a heating cycle, and it will heat the liquids and the ingredients up. So I'm just going to do my 1½ cup of water, my 1/3 cup of oil, my 1/3 cup of honey, hear my pitch go up. By that time I walk over and turn it off. And that's all the cleaning it needs. There's my oil and honey. And then 2 teaspoons of salt. Just sprinkle it in. I always put my salt down in the liquid so it gets dissolved a little better. We use real salt, and it doesn't dissolve as readily as commercial salt. This is lecithin. It's a natural emulsifier. It naturally occurs in your grains and beans. It is what brings your cholesterol down. It is what's in grains and beans that will bring your cholesterol down. Lecithin is an emulsifier. Now I'm putting it in here to make the bread softer. Yeah, let's see if those are, see if they're done. They should be. Yep, that looks good. You want to just take it over there? That'd be great. Anyway, and so now, and I like to use an egg, because an egg actually helps the gluten develop and it makes the bread smoother texture. So I'm going to use an egg here. And you just crack it down in. Some say put the flour in and crack it on top. You can do it either way. I've never had an egg poach in the liquids, just never had it happen. So now I've got everything in here except my flour and my yeast. So now I know that I've got almost exactly 4½ cups of flour, so I don't even have to measure this. If my canister is empty, I don't have to measure this. So I emptied my canister, and I measured my 3 cups of grain, so now I don't even have to measure my 4½ cups of flour. To me, it's easier to measure the grain than it is the flour. And now all I do is make a little well right there. Oh, I was going to put some flaxseed in there, and I forgot. And then I'm going to do my yeast, and we sell yeast by the pound. It's a little over $5 for a whole pound of yeast, and you can use it whether you're using a bread machine or by hand or whatever. Make your little well there in your dry ingredients. Put your yeast right there, and now all I've got to do is snap my pan in, make sure it completely snaps, and choose my course. And I'm going to choose my homemade setting. Actually, I think I'm going to just do dough, because I might make some pizza or something with this. So I'm just going to do the quick dough cycle, and so this will knead it and won't kick into the bake cycle. So if I want to completely bake it, I choose a cycle that is a complete cycle. But I'm just going to do dough because I don't need another loaf of bread. Yes? Yes, you can. That's the nice thing about the Zoharushi, that it does have a cake setting and a quick bread setting. So you can... I don't know. I've not looked at others in a long time. I think some of them. Does anybody know? Do you have a quick bread setting? Yours does not. This one has, a sourdough setting. You can even make jam in it. It'll sit there and stir your jelly and cook it. It has a cake setting. I know they even, if you go on Zoharushi's website, they even have making meatloaf in here. They kind of bill it as a portable oven, little portable, and they make cheesecake and all kinds of things. So you can do. Yes. Yep. So that is the Zoharushi bread machine. Here is, I'm going to put our mill away, and I'll. Yes, it actually, when you choose the cycle, it'll beep when it's time for you to put your raisins and things in. But I actually just dump all mine in at the same time, and I just, because it's got to be easy. So I just got to dump it and then come back and have it ready, if that's the way it's going to be. Another nice feature of the Zoharushi is it has a time bake cycle, so you can put it on up to 13 hours ahead. So you saw how fast it is to put it on. So you could literally put it on at night before you go to bed and wake up tomorrow morning to a nice, room filled, house smelling of cinnamon raisin bread or something like that. Yes? I would have put it down in the liquids. And her question was, when would you add the flax? Flax seeds, are full of your omega-3 fatty acids and just really good for you. And they actually make the texture of bread a lot softer. That's why I didn't want to just sprinkle it on the top. I find that putting it down in the liquids makes it kind of a gum almost. It makes it a pasty texture. I know what you're fixing to say. You cannot grind flax in the mill, the grain mills, right? Yeah. The mill will grind any kind of dry grain or bean into flour, but you don't want to put like sugars. You don't want to put nuts. It won't make nut butter. It'll make a mess if you do that. So anything that will make flour. Your flax seed is a little too oily. So what I use for my flax seed, because I do enjoy putting them in a smoothie or in my bread, is I use our little TriBest personal blender. And this is a great little 1/4 horsepower motor, and it comes, the blender is like $69, $79. I can't remember how much it is. And it comes with 2 16-ounce cups and 2 8-ounce cups. This is called the wet blade and a dry blade. So you just put your flax seed in here. Screw your lid on. 65? Okay. And you just engage it, and then you blend. And the nice thing about this is it'll do your smoothies. It'll do an individual smoothie, and it is so easy to clean. And you can just drink right out of the cup. So you can put your yogurt or your juice or your milk or kefir or whatever you're using, and then put your frozen fruit in there, a little shot of honey, and then put your lid on, blend it up. It will grind. It will blend. It will blend frozen fruit. It's a very, very powerful little machine, and you can just drink right out of here. What I love about it, then you just rinse your blade off, and it's clean, ready for the next one. So that's our little TriBest blender. Great gift idea. Great gift idea for college student. Great gift idea, or anybody. Mine sits on my counter. I have a very small kitchen, so there's only a few things that sit on my counter. My grain mill, my mixer, and my little personal blender are the 3 things on my counter. So let's open up our black-eyed peas. Sharon's got the muffins over there cooling slightly, and I'm going to pass this off to her, and we'll get these serving. Brad, can you come help serve, or Caleb or something? Here's our black-eyed peas. Can y'all smell those? Oh my goodness gracious. I use just a little salt and pepper and the eat your vegetables. This is our dip mixes. I love them, love them, love them. Where did it go? Here it is. Yeah, we have all kinds. The roasted red pepper is what I love to do my rubs for my meat. The Jack and the Bean dip is kind of a Mexican. I'll throw it in my black beans or something like that when I'm cooking things like that. Another thing you want, huh?
Jack is a Mexican?
No. Anyway, whatever. Another thing watch out for is pasta. You know, you want to make sure you're using a whole grain pasta. That's an area that, you know, you might be thinking, oh, I'm doing all whole grains, and if you're still eating a lot of pasta, it's, you know, don't be fooled by semolina flour. Semolina is not a type of grain. It's white flour, durum wheat white flour. So we have this is our brown rice, whole grain brown rice pasta, and we have a spelt pasta as well. I love this. This morning, in your handout, I was going to tell you, I left a couple of recipes in there. This is actually from the handout from my first class of my Healthy Eating Simplified. I do a 4-week course in the winter. And so I left the pasta Alfredo in there. Oh my gosh, that is the best pasta Alfredo, and it cooks in a pressure cooker. And actually, I do it in 3 minutes. And so this morning, I had to leave the house at 7:30. My kids go to their homeschool program. They had to leave at 8, but I had to pack them a lunch. So it's easier to get up and make that pasta Alfredo. So I made pasta Alfredo this morning before I left at 7:30. You just heat the milk and the broth and then dump the raw noodles in. You don't even cook them. Put them in the broth, pop the pressure cooker lid on. It comes up to pressure. It pressures for 3 minutes. You let the pressure come down, and then I stirred in the Parmesan cheese. And then we have these great little insulated thermos things. They're called Mr. Bento by Zoharushi. They're a little pricey, but oh my goodness, each one of my children have it. Great way to use your leftovers. Send your kids to school with a hot lunch. It has 4 containers, and so I packed bread in the bottom one and the hot pasta Alfredo in the middle one. I didn't have anything cold for them today because I didn't get salad made for them or the cucumbers or anything like that. So they just went with the pasta Alfredo. But that was easier than making sandwiches for 3 of them. Oh yeah, it keeps hot for up to 6 hours. And it keeps hot things hot and cold things cold. The 2 bottom ones have insulated lids so you can stack them, and then you can stack cold things like, you know, salad or whatever in the 2 top ones. And yeah, it's amazing. It's a great kids gift. You're going to have to quarter those. And so there's our peas and rice. They're going to serve you the muffins, and I thought I would make you a smoothie. How does that sound? Okay, with the kefir and some frozen fruit. And I always crack up laughing, and I don't mean to offend anyone. When someone asks me for a smoothie recipe, I'm like, just whatever, just put it in there. I mean, just do it. And there I have to tell you, we do have a book called 1, 2, 3 Smoothie. I've gotten some great ideas there. But honestly, I go back to the old faithful. This morning, that was my breakfast, was a cup of kefir in my little instant blender. And this summer, I had bought peaches. When peaches were in season, I bought like 4 cases of them, and we sliced them and we froze them. And so I took those out and threw a handful of peaches in there, a little shot of honey and a little shot of vanilla to sweeten it up just a little bit. And that was my breakfast on the way here this morning. So I'm going to make a smoothie for you. Another great way, so this is a great way to get the good bacteria recolonizing your gut. Another great way to use the cultured dairy is this is our yogurt strainer, our yogurt cheese maker. I just dumped in a whole container of yogurt. It actually was filled all the way up to here, and it's already drained that much. And now what happens is it's going to drain this liquid off. That's your whey. And this will become, if I leave it in there overnight, it will become a sour cream consistency, thickness. So I can use this then like sour cream. And that's what we'll use on our burritos or our tacos or whatever. And I'll use this for the base of my dips. All those dip mixes, I'll mix with this with mayonnaise and the dip mixes. So now, when they least expect it, you say, here, I made some dip and I've got some carrot sticks for y'all. You can have all the dip you want. They're getting their good bacteria, and you didn't tell them they were eating yogurt. Don't tell them a word. What they don't know won't hurt them. So, or maybe it's you that needs to be fooled. I don't know. So anyway. My sons that we adopted are from Latvia, and they have gotten totally spoiled now with the sweetened yogurts, but I mean, they drank kefir and yogurt plain. I mean, just plain, like glug, 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 glug. And I'm like, okay. Anyway. But now they like the sweetened yogurts and kefir. Yes? Absolutely. What is wonderful about this kefir starter is it will ferment and culture anything. You can use coconut milk, you can use almond milk, you can use soy milk, you can use whole milk, you can use fruit juice. The fruit juice is unbelievable. And that gets your good bacteria in there, and it's slightly, it produces carbon dioxide as well. Unlike your yogurt organisms, the kefir organisms produce a little bubbly, so it will ferment that juice, and it tastes like a soda. It's bubbly like a soda. And the cool thing about doing juice, and we also have used the kefir starter in herbal tea when we had some herbal tea left over one class, sweetened herbal tea, just put the kefir starter in there. It was fantastic. Slightly bubbly, slightly sweet, got your good bacteria going on. And all you have to do, like I said, is one package will culture 1 quart of milk to start with. And then before you put that jar of kefir in the refrigerator, just take a couple of tablespoons out and culture your next batch with what you've already made. You can use, I believe it's a cup to do a gallon. So you can do, like, if you wanted a lot, you could go ahead and do a gallon at a time. And you can use what you already have cultured, you can use it up to 7 times, 7 generations. Before you need to start over with a new batch. But doing the kefir starter with the fruit juice, you can use it indefinitely as your batch for your next. Yeah. Her question is, can you use raw milk? Absolutely. That's what I use at home. So, all right. Well, I'm going to pour some kefir in here. All right, and we'll put our flaxseed in here. Huh? The black-eyed peas? Are they not, I mean, and how easy is that? I mean, that is so easy. And, I mean, that's a side dish, or put it in the middle of a burrito, or just eat it like that. And you could add a little more liquid if you wanted it a little soupier, so you could have like a little more like peas and cornbread, beans and cornbread. I don't know. How's the muffin? And see how fast and easy that was? Come on now. Yes, isn't that, the first time I thought of using the millet, I wanted to think of ways to put the millet in. My kids weren't real wild about it boiled and eaten like that. It was a little grainy for them. And even though it's a staple breakfast cereal in India and China, they use that like we do oatmeal. So you can cook it with milk. You could probably do it very much like the steel cut oats that we did this morning. Cook it like that if you want. But my kids they weren't real fond of it. So I really wanted to look for ways to put it in things. And then I found out that it didn't have to be soaked or anything. You could put it, it's not so hard that you couldn't bite into it. So the first time I put it in the muffins, I thought, they're not going to like this because they don't like nuts. And I thought, they're not going to like that texture. My little youngest one, that was her favorite. I mean, even without the bananas or anything, she just liked millet muffins. And it's just a wonderful nuttiness. If they don't like the seeds, then just grind it, because and substitute a 1/4 cup of millet flour for a 1/4 cup of the flour in the recipe. So you can do that as well. All right. I'm using our handy mega blender here, just because you're a crowd. If I were home, I'd be using my little instant blender. And this is I just bought a mixed fruit package today. It's probably enough. I haven't made a big batch in so long. I'm not sure. I'll put just a little more. I'll taste it before I serve it. Another great thing, just so you know, and y'all try this. Y'all are not going to believe this, but you can also just take like dark berries and use just a little fruit juice and put a handful of salad mix, salad greens. Kid you not, you will not taste it. You will not taste it at all. If you use dark berries, your kids will never know it's there. And I do a whole thing of frozen ones and then just enough juice or even just water to make it blend, and a handful of the greens. And my grandkids, they come over and they say, would you make us some sherbet? That's what it tastes like, sherbet, you know, because it doesn't have the milk or the yogurt, just the fruit and a little bit of juice. And if you use the frozen fruit, it'll be frozen. And now the kale works. Spinach is actually kind of strong, and I could taste the spinach, but the salad greens. And that's what, and first time someone told me about that, I was like, that sounds gross. And she goes, try it, try it, try it, try it. And I couldn't believe it. You don't taste it at all. So, all right, well, let's make this, yes. I like to use the Bolt House, the come in like the quart. I don't know if I have any in here. It's this brand, and they make like a smoothie one, an all-berry one. They make several brands, but you could use apple juice. You can use anything. I've used orange juice. I've used apple juice. In fact, my daughter does orange juice, pineapple, and banana with the spinach. She dehydrates her spinach and then powders it and then puts a tablespoon of the spinach powder in there. And she has, for her kids, and she calls it a Shrek smoothie. Oh, that's great if it's green like Shrek. You won't taste it. So really the sky's the limit. Just enough juice or water or something to make it blend. Is that a Shrek smoothie? Yeah. Yeah, but you can literally use anything. But I love the Bolt House ones because they're all natural and they're organic. I think they're organic. But they have several. I love the all-berry one, and it doesn't take much. It's just enough liquid to let it puree. Yep. All right. I have 6 grandchildren. My oldest grandchild is 8, and my youngest is 6 months, 5 months. Yes, Hudson. Yep. That's my oldest daughter has 3 children. My son Caleb has 2 children. And then number 3 doesn't have any. Number 4 is not even married, so he better not have any. And number 5 has been married for a year and a half, and she had her first child in June. Number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9 still live at home. 7, 8, and 9 are in school, so they better not have any children either. They're 15, 16, 17, yeah. So my daughter, I'm so excited. This is a little aside. I guess I can dismiss the class and let all of y'all that want to go. I'll blend up the smoothie, and then I'll tell you. My daughter's actually filming a TV show right now. I don't know anything about the TV show, so I hope it's not like just terrible vulgar or something like that. She's not doing anything vulgar. She is a dancer, and she got called to go to an audition for a dance scene in this show called Vampire Diaries. Do y'all know that show? Is it bad or is it? Anyway, so she's going to do this. Evidently, they're having some kind of vampire ball or something. She is pretty pumped. So that's where she is today, filming that. Yeah, Evander Holyfield's house. And she goes, the dress I'm wearing costs $4,000 or something like that. So she's pretty pumped. So yeah, I don't know why I told you all that. But anyway. Hey, Sharon, could I maybe have some kind of little cup? I want to taste this. Make sure I have it sweet enough. All righty. I did add a little bit of vanilla, and I mean, you can see how thick it is. If you even put more frozen fruit, it could come out just about like ice cream. Or less fruit would come out more like, a drink. So you can make it to your liking. I'm going to just taste and make sure it's sweet enough. Oh, wow. I think that's good. That first smoothie I had this morning is wearing off a little bit. I'm going to make it a little smoother because there's Still got little chunks of fruit in there. All right. Okay. So I hope you see how easy healthy eating can really be. It's just so worth it. The health benefits to you and your family. Yes.
Well, I'm from Iowa, and I have no idea where on earth you can find anything like this in Iowa.
The machines we can ship very easily, so that's not a problem. The grain is probably the heaviest thing we can find you. It's grown there, so you can find wheat in Iowa, I promise.
Divvy that.
Yeah, and do you fly or drive? Okay, we can send you back. We can load you up. We're masters at getting... Well, and and that's the other thing to me that is so exciting, is this is healthy food that your family will eat. My kids won't always drink the green things that I do and won't do some of the things that I do, but I've never seen them turn down bread. And I mean, they have their likes and dislikes. Some of them don't like blueberry muffins, some of them do. Some of them don't like, but they all like the bread. And I'll never forget, this was several years ago at the Cobb Galleria. We were doing a homeschool show there. Funniest story. In fact, I think about this all the time. I was speaking, and it was my lecture that was on my CD. Please, if you've not heard the CD, or if you have heard the CD and want one to share, take the free CD. They're there for the taking. But anyway, I spoke. That's where that was taped, was at a homeschool show. So that's the teaching that I usually do. So I was speaking, and this lady, she heard me. And when you listen to the tape, like I only did the history of white flour today. I take you through digestion and show you how your bowels are supposed to work and how sinus congestion. Yeah, we call it the poopy talk. But anyway, when you see that, you're just going to go, I mean, when you hear it, to make the connection of chronic sinus mucus congestion and junk sitting in your colon, you're just going to go, oh my goodness. I personally lived on antihistamines. And thought postnasal drip was the way God had made me. And when we started making the bread, and all of that went away, and I can stand here today and tell you, 20 years I've been doing this, 20 years I've not had an antihistamine or a decongestant of any kind in 20 years. My two youngest children that were conceived and born since we started making our bread have never had an antihistamine or a decongestant, not one day in their life. We have to hunt for ibuprofen in our house. The only time it really is needed is for girl issues. And even then, it's not always, because girls have issues. But I mean, it's just remarkable. But anyway, so I was teaching and speaking at this homeschool show, and this lady, I mean, she saw this, and I explained it all, of sickness and immune system and how it's all related, cancer, heart disease. I mean, I go through all these diseases. And she was just, I mean, it makes sense. Like I said, every doctor that's ever heard is like, oh my goodness, it makes sense. It's correct. It's right information. It's physiology. It's biochemistry. It's correct. So she followed me back to the booth. She said, okay, I really want to do this. I really want a meal. And she said, but I am so afraid that my child is not going to eat this. And I said, well, this bread is so delicious. Surely you can find something that your child will like. I kid you not, she was standing there going, I would do it right now if I knew my child would eat it. All of a sudden, this little boy comes running up to the table that had been coming and going from our booth all weekend, eating the tortillas, the muffins, the pancakes, because we cook the whole weekend, because we want people to see that it's delicious. This little boy comes running up, and I recognized him, didn't know they were related. He comes running up, and he goes, Mom, where have you been? I've been looking for you everywhere. You got to taste this. This stuff is the best food I've ever eaten. And she just looked at me and she goes, okay, just fix me up. I mean, there it was. And that's what I find. It's healthy food that your family will eat. And like I said earlier, it covers a huge spectrum. And I've had people tell me, one grandmother came up, another homeschool show, and she said, my grandson had warts and, wouldn't eat the bread and because, that was whole wheat. And she said, so I started making cookies. She said, I made your flaxseed oatmeal cookies that's in your cookbook. He loved them. In 3 weeks, 36 warts were gone from cookies. I mean, it's just amazing. The skin eruptions, I think probably like the rashes, like I know that pellagra, it's a real red nose and almost like cuts and it oozes. Probably, you know, psoriasis, eczema, those kinds of situations. But that's the type of eruption that pellagra. Pellagra is the real, it's a nose thing, I think. But lots of testimonies, healing of psoriasis, eczema, psoriasis, for real. Yes. Yes. Well, that's the thing, and this is another another situation where I was at one of my children's softball games. They played one of my daughters, and I try to be low profile. You know, I'm not going to sit there and talk poop at their ball games. So, I mean, it just kind of embarrasses them, you know. So I was sitting there minding my own business, but a customer of ours was a mom. Her daughter was on the team, and she was sitting there. Well, we could hear the coach's wife talking about her bowel habits. It's amazing how we talk openly about them, you know. And she was very concerned, and she was saying that, you know, she had 5 horrendous bowel movements a day. They were like turning on a water faucet, and that she said, you know, I've been struggling with this for years to no avail. No medication they put me on has helped. And she said, now I'm going to have to go. They're going to scope me. They think I might have cancer. You know, they're going to look for that. And all of a sudden, the friend sitting next to me goes, well, you should talk to her. And I'm on the top bleacher, you know. So the whole stands all of a sudden looks up at me, and I'm like, well, we have this bread, you know, grinding your wheat, da-da-da-da-da. And see, that's the thing that's so cool about whole grains and the fiber that's in there. Do you know of anything that can help diarrhea and help constipation? And irritable bowel really is nothing more than an advanced stage of constipation, because when you get that build up, your bowels just start going crazy, and they're trying to get rid of that stuff that's in there. So the bread, the grain fiber, will bulk up your stool, so it'll either make a watery stool firm, or it'll make a hard stool soft because it absorbs the water. So it will correct either issue. But the lady was there, and so I told her about the bread, and that was on a Thursday night, because I was going down to the Atlanta homeschool show as soon as that game was over. Saturday I came home. Sunday morning I get up, and they were having practice that afternoon. I made her a loaf of bread and took her a dozen, I think, blueberry muffins or something like that. Took them to her and said, here, you know, try this bread. That following Thursday, we had a game. I took her another loaf of bread and another dozen muffins. Following Sunday afternoon, they had practice, 1 week. She came up to me and said, what is in this bread? What are you putting in here that's doing? She said, I'm still having 5 bowel movements a day. 4 are like turning on a water faucet. 1 is bulking up. By the next Thursday, because I took her another loaf of bread, by the next Thursday, she went, my bowels are completely normal. I mean, this is amazing. It is amazing. Another testimony, and I could stand here and tell you testimony after testimony, but our ministry, Real Bread Outreach, actually sent the mom of one of our customers a meal. She's in Massachusetts, and we sent her mom a meal because she couldn't afford it, and her mom had been on steroids for bleeding bowels for years. And she was 75 years old. She and her husband had basically become homebound. She could not leave the house because of her bowels. She could not sleep through the night. She was having to get up and go to the bathroom in the night. And then the steroid use, they were trying to get her off the steroids because she had been on them for so many years. And she said every time they start to pull her off the steroids, the bleeding starts again. And she said they're thinking now maybe don't do any gluten. So she said, Sue, I just don't know what to do. I really think if my mom could just get the whole grain. And she said, but we can't afford to give her one. She can't afford to get one. And I said, you know what? That's what the ministry is for. So we sent her a grain meal. And the customer, the young girl that was here, she was going up to visit her mom. So she went up, and she said, I will teach her how to do this. 5 days, her mom was sleeping through the night. Her mom came off of the steroids, and she's just a walking testimony now. In fact, she and her husband were out in their yard working, and the neighbor came over and said, I thought y'all had died because I never saw y'all. She has her life back. I mean, it's amazing. Blood sugar responds very quickly. If permanent damage has not been done to your pancreas, blood sugar, you know, if you have blood sugar issues, you know it responds every meal, just like that. So if you start giving it whole grains that are going to absorb that sugar, make it released into the body more slowly, you're going to find you're getting the energy you need without a spike and a drop, a spike and a drop. Your blood sugar is going to stay here. Your energy levels are going to stay here. Another time when we first started doing this, I took bread everywhere, potlucks at church, you know, everywhere. And I'd made all these rolls because when I made them out of white flour, I'd have to make hundreds, you know, and now making them out of this, I would have all these rolls left over because people couldn't just eat them all. And so I was sending rolls home. I'll never forget, I sent rolls home with this young mom. She had 2 very active, that's understatement, very active children. She called me like 2 days later and said, what's in this bread? She said, I'm hiding it from my children. She said, because I now have the energy to keep up with them. In 2 days of 10 dinner rolls. I could go on and on and on. It's just, and that's why I'm saying, and how many things how many of y'all have tried different things over the years? You make this, you know, New Year's is coming. We're going to make those resolutions to eat healthy. And how many of them are you still doing 3 weeks later, much less 20 years later? I am still doing this, and I am more excited today than I was 20 years ago when I started. How many healthy things can you say that about? I've never seen anything that just across the board produces such immediate, noticeable effects. I thank you for sharing that. I mean, that was my 6 things that I noticed right away was my headaches went away. Well, constipation went away. I was constipated all my life. Constipation was gone. Boom, done. First day. My dependence on antihistamines went away. My sugar cravings went away. My energy levels were better. My headaches, just chronic headaches, went away. I didn't have to get rid of my husband. And my son's warts went away in the first month. And so what I did was I began to go, what is in this bread? And I went back to my biochemistry, my physiology books, my food science books, and I found it is real. Every nutrient to break down fat and cholesterol is in whole grains and beans. Cholesterol was not an issue, high cholesterol, until white bread came on the market. And that's what, I mean, Dr. Shute said, heart disease was not an issue till white bread, you know, he said when white bread and whole grains started being fractured, he said we lost one of the most potent antithrombins, anti-clotting agents, strokes, aneurysms, all these things. I mean, I'm not going to stand here and tell you it's going to reverse everything you've ever had, and people write me that and go, my wife has this or I have this, do you think it'll help? I'm like, you know what, I don't know, but you won't be constipated. You know, I mean, I don't know, but here's what I stand amazed. I stand in awe because usually they come back and go, it's the bread, it's got to be the bread, that's all we changed. And this happened, this happened, this happened. So there was a lady came in the store and she said, I just got to tell you, I just want to thank you. She said, we've been doing this for 1 month now. And she said, my husband came off the heart transplant list. And she said, we went to the doctor, and the doctor looked at him and said, what in the world have you done? And she said, I told him all we did was start grinding our wheat, making our bread. And he said, well, he's not out of the woods yet. He said, but his heart is working so strongly, I cannot justify him being on the transplant list. And that was in the front room of our store. And I wish I had asked her name because I don't know where she is now or who it was or what it was. But that is thrilling to me, to be able to have your life back.
The lecture that you were describing is more in depth. Which one of your classes is that?
It's actually on the CD. I typically don't lecture here at the store. I just do the cooking classes. We have the free CD that's 90 minutes. We also have a CD set that's 5 CDs, and that is a 3.5-hour lecture on the bread. It's also my testimony of healing of colorectal cancer and the emotional roots of disease, somewhat a spiritual message there. Or we also have a DVD that is just the lecture. That was done in 2005, and that's video. And that's the 3.5-hour lecture. Yep, we have that out there. This is the 90-minute. This goes pretty far, but on the long version, I get into fats and oils, and I spend about 45 minutes even talking about fatty acids and what they do in your body. This one's pretty thorough, though. It goes. I know it talks about heart disease, cancer. It's got the digestion. I mean, it's got that. Yes, absolutely. You can take all of these that you want. Yep, just don't put it in a drawer. Couple of cookbooks real quick. This is one of my favorites, Whole Grains Every Day, Every Way. This is my philosophy in life. People always say, how much bread do I need to eat? I'm like, how much Jesus do you need? As much as you can consume, you know? I mean, just eat it. Whole grains every day, every way. My meals are determined by what kind of bread I want to have. You know, if it's pizza or burrito or cornbread or whatever, I find what do I want to go with this. So we need to be getting those whole grains every meal. Every meal. If you want to see the benefits, every meal, and nothing white. Nothing white. Yes. Well, her question is, everybody's developing wheat allergies. Of course they're going to develop wheat allergies because of the junk that's in the grocery store that they've been eating all these years. All that processed flour. It's basically gluten and starch. And America now can't digest hardly anything. Have you ever seen so many allergies? Ever. So it's not just the wheat and the gluten, because corn doesn't have any gluten, and it's a huge allergen. What's the deal? I think it is from all the foods that have these extracted components of these foods. Corn is everywhere. Corn syrup, cornstarch, it's in baking soda. It's dusted on things that you don't see so that it doesn't stick, and they don't have to list that because it's not an ingredient. So it's everywhere. So now we have all these corn allergies. The same with wheat. Wheat gluten is in soy sauce. It's in soup mixes. It's in most of your taco seasoning. You know, all these things. And then not to mention the white flour that's gluten and starch. That's all it is. And now we have these gummed up digestive systems. And, you know, that's the issues. Of course we're going to have allergies. But I have seen so many people not have a problem at all with milling their own. Particularly like the lady I was just telling you about, the elderly lady, they told her maybe you should go on a gluten-free diet. And you should have seen the customer. She was like, I don't know if I can do this. And finally, we were going to try spelt, because spelt is an ancient grain. And that's something that you may need to do, some of these ancient grains, if you do have a wheat allergy. And that's why I love this cookbook. But she said, you know what, Sue? She said, forget it. I'm just going to try the good old red wheat and just see how she does. If she has issues when I'm there, then we'll do something else. Shouldn't have any issues. I know Sharon's son truly has gluten allergies. He truly does. He had all the skin eruptions and everything. And so she's been on gluten-free diet, for quite a while with him. And but then we met, and she started grinding her own. And see, that's the other thing. Even if you have to go gluten-free, grinding your own is like night and day. Sharon said, even her son noticed when she made the brownies out of brown rice flour that she ground and the stuff that she bought in the store already ground. She said the difference was night and day. Well, she had tried spelt with him, spelt bread from the store. He couldn't eat it. But when she started grinding it herself, he was fine. So, you know, there's a lot of issues out there, and I tell you, this whole gluten thing is wearing me out. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you. It is.
They're treating it like the devil.
They are. They're treating it like it's some additive. It's not. It's the protein portion of the grain. And there's actually some of the amino acids that are in the gluten structure. You know, a protein is a long strand of different amino acids. Glutamine is actually very healing to the gut. Glutamine is. Now, a true celiac is born without the enzyme to digest the amino acid gliadin. And so, yes, I mean, there's some real things. But what I think is happening in America, because now they're saying, oh, well, now they're finding out that you can develop celiac. I think what is the problem is you can't digest a lot of things. You got a digestion issue. You know, I don't know that, you know, that you were you can't digest it because you can't digest a lot of things. So I think there's a bigger picture here, but it's very frustrating because it's being treated like it's this horrible thing when it's protein. And yes.
You need to finish that about the ad.
Oh,
It's not in all gluten.
it's not in all gluten either, and that's what I shared with Sharon. I learned that spelt, though it technically has gluten and can rise when you use yeast with it, it doesn't have gliadin. And yes, that's part of the problem. So that's why even, a fellow I talked to, and I would say, you got to consider this for yourself. I'm not going to tell you if you're a celiac, go eat all the spelt you want. Sharon kind of went, oh, okay, I'm going to try a little bit with him, and he doesn't have any problems. But I spoke with someone that has a couple of true celiacs, been celiac since, diagnosed since they were young, and they're eating spelt with no problems, which is wonderful, major, because you can make yeast bread with spelt without having to do all this stuff to it. And that's why I love Maria Speck's book, Ancient Grains, because she uses a lot of the barley, the quinoa, the spelt, the kamut, those older grains. And but Sharon's been a real blessing because her son also, a lot of the gluten-free grains, they tend to be constipating. They don't have the fiber in there. And she said her son, he's only 9 years old, he noticed when he started eating the spelt the difference and in his bowel habits. So there's just some great things. And if you are truly a celiac or you truly have gluten issues, all the more reason to be grinding your own, because the stuff out there is expensive, and just because it says gluten-free does not mean it's healthy. I'm telling you, most of it is white rice, white sugar, just junk. And it just says gluten-free, so everybody thinks it's healthy. So I love our cookies that are gluten-free out there, made with garbanzo bean flour. So there's a lot of things you can do, and even if you aren't having to go gluten-free, there's a lot of, it's fun. It's just fun to cook this way and to put food on the table that your family not only is going to love, but it's going to thrive on. The oatmeal that we had were actually our, would you go, it's right down this road, there's a bag of, it's the steel cut oats, which are just the oat groats chopped. I roll my own oats when I make oatmeal, but we do sell rolled oats. Now those are the steel cut oats, that's Bob's Red Mill steel cut oats is what that was. But we do sell rolled oats, that's the only processed grain that we sell. And it is, rolled oats are steamed and then rolled between roller, and they'll flatten. They're so soft that they'll flatten. But this is what I used for the oatmeal this morning, was the steel cut oats. No, the recipe was in the Shamrock and Peach cookbook, and it was actually 2 cups of milk, 2 cups of water, and I think a cup of the steel cut oats. It was very creamy. Now, because these take a little more liquid. Yes, if y'all need to go, we are officially finished, and I just want to thank you all for coming to our Healthy Eating Simplified.